O200 Collective presents The Stillness Advantage, Mastering the Power of Pause to Multiply Your Success and Sanity, by Nova Sage.
Preface. The Paradox of Slowing Down. I never intended to write this book. For most of my career, I embodied the very problem I'm now addressing, an addiction to perpetual motion. I measured success by checked boxes, emails answered at midnight, and the envious glances of colleagues when I somehow managed to squeeze 30 hours of work into a 24-hour day. That pace nearly cost me everything that matters. 3 years ago, while delivering a keynote presentation to executives, ironically about maximizing efficiency, I experienced what my doctor later called a stress-induced cognitive episode. In simpler terms, my mind went completely blank mid-sentence. For 47 excruciating seconds, my assistant timed it, I stood frozen before a room of 300 industry leaders, unable to recall my own name, let alone my carefully crafted talking points. That moment of unintended stillness changed everything. The illusion of constant motion. You've likely picked up this book because something in your life feels unsustainable. Perhaps you're accomplishing more than ever, yet feeling less fulfilled. Maybe your productivity apps are perfectly synced across devices, but your connection to what truly matters has become dangerously tenuous. You're not alone. I've spent the last 3 years researching and interviewing over 200 high performers across industries who discovered, often the hard way, that strategic stillness is the ultimate competitive advantage. This isn't about meditation retreats or abandoning ambition. It's about recognizing that the space between actions often determines their quality and impact. Consider James, a startup founder who made critical decisions while racing between meetings, checking his phone during his daughter's recitals, and responding to emails at 3 a.m. His company grew quickly, but collapsed just as fast when multiple preventable mistakes converged in crisis. I was so busy building momentum, he told me, that I never created the space to see where we were actually headed. Or Sarah, a senior attorney whose reputation for immediate responses made her the firm's go-to problem solver, until she found herself hospitalized with exhaustion, watching her cases reassigned while she recovered. I thought indispensability meant never pausing, she said. I discovered the hard way that effectiveness requires rhythm, not just relentless speed. The science of strategic stillness. What distinguishes this approach from typical productivity advice is its foundation in neuroscience and performance psychology. When we deliberately pause, we activate different neural pathways than those used during periods of action and reaction. These pathways enable integration, pattern recognition, and creative problem solving, capabilities that remain dormant amid constant activity. The research is clear. Your most valuable contributions will never emerge from the busy, reactive parts of your day. They come from moments when you step back, creating the mental space for insight and clarity to surface. This book translates these findings into practical frameworks you can implement immediately, regardless of your industry or role. Each chapter builds upon this foundation with specific techniques for incorporating powerful pauses into your daily life, decision-making processes, and long-term planning. You'll learn when to accelerate and when to deliberately slow down for maximum impact. Beyond individual practice, I wrote this for anyone who suspects there must be a more sustainable path to success than perpetual motion. Whether you're a corporate executive, entrepreneur, creative professional, or simply someone seeking greater impact with less frenzy, these pages contain practical strategies to transform how you work and live. Thank you for investing your time in these ideas. My hope is that by the final page, you'll have discovered that the most powerful move in your arsenal might be the decision to momentarily stop moving, creating space for clarity, connection, and purposeful action to emerge. Let's begin. Chapter 1. The Slow Motion Crash of Constant Hustle. Why your constant motion is getting you nowhere. Fast pause, just for a moment. When was the last time you didn't feel rushed? When your to-do list wasn't spilling over into tomorrow, or your mind wasn't already 3 steps ahead of your body? If you're struggling to remember, you're not alone. We've collectively bought into the myth that constant motion equals productivity, that the busier we appear, the more successful we must be. This delusion costs us more than we realize. The cultural glorification of the hustle has reached epidemic proportions. We celebrate the entrepreneur working 80-hour weeks, the parent managing a career while volunteering at school, the friend who somehow maintains 5 side projects alongside a full-time job. Social media amplifies these narratives with highlight reels of productivity, leaving many of us feeling inadequate if we're not constantly achieving. But this never-ending sprint isn't sustainable, nor is it smart. What we're witnessing is a slow-motion crash, one where the casualties are our health, relationships, creativity, and ultimately our results. Research consistently shows that our brains simply aren't wired for constant activity. Neuroscientists have documented how perpetual busyness diminishes cognitive function, impairs decision-making, and erodes creativity, precisely the capabilities that drive meaningful success. The mounting evidence suggests that what we perceive as powering through is actually degrading our most valuable asset, our mind's capacity for insight and innovation. The irony is brutal. In our desperate attempt to accomplish more, we're systematically undermining our ability to do anything well. The physical toll is equally alarming. Chronic stress from constant hustle triggers hormonal imbalances that compromise immune function, disrupt sleep patterns, and accelerate aging processes. Medical professionals now routinely identify work-related stress as a contributing factor to heart disease, depression, and a host of inflammatory conditions. Your body keeps the score, even when your ambition would prefer to ignore the mounting debt. Throughout this chapter, we'll examine these warning signs in detail, helping you recognize when you've crossed from productive momentum into counterproductive overdrive. The professional consequences might be less immediately visible, but are no less real. I've worked with countless high achievers who discovered, often too late, that their relentless pace led to diminishing returns. Critical errors increase, strategic thinking suffers, and relationships fray when we operate in perpetual emergency mode. We'll explore how to identify these patterns before they derail your career, and how intentional pauses can actually accelerate your progress toward meaningful goals. This chapter marks the beginning of a fundamental shift in how you approach work and life. We'll start by diagnosing the specific ways constant hustle undermines your effectiveness and well-being. You'll learn to recognize the early warning signs of burnout, not just exhaustion, but the subtler indicators that your system is heading for collapse. Through reflective exercises, we'll help you identify where perpetual motion has actually held you back rather than propelled you forward. This honest assessment creates the foundation for everything that follows. The chapters ahead will build on this foundation, providing you with practical strategies to integrate strategic stillness into your daily routine, enhance your decision-making through mindful pauses, deepen relationships through present-focused attention, and ultimately achieve what we call stillness productivity, accomplishing more by doing less, but with greater intention and impact. You'll discover that slowing down isn't about reducing your ambitions, but about achieving them more efficiently and meaningfully. The journey begins with a simple recognition. Stillness isn't the absence of action, it's the foundation of effective action. In a world that won't stop shouting, your competitive advantage lies in the power of the pause. Let's discover how to harness it. The stillness between the waves. The sunlight filtered through the half-drawn blinds, casting long shadows across the living room, where Mark Davis sat hunched over his laptop. His shoulders tensed as he checked his watch, 2:37 p.m. He had promised himself he would finish the quarterly report by noon, but here he was, still grinding away with little progress to show for it. Mark rubbed his eyes, feeling the dry sting that came from staring at the screen too long. The house was quiet, except for the soft ticking of the grandfather clock in the corner, a family heirloom his father had given him when he'd earned his promotion to director last year. "Time is the only currency that matters," his father had said. Now the steady tick-tock seemed to mock his lack of progress. Outside his window, the ocean stretched toward the horizon, waves rolling in with unhurried persistence. Mark glanced up at it, then back at his screen, where the cursor blinked accusingly. He had always prided himself on his ability to power through, to outwork everyone else at the firm. 3 promotions in 5 years, the youngest director in company history, all because he never slowed down. But lately, his mind felt like an overheated engine, spinning but producing nothing of value. "You're losing your edge," he muttered to himself, the words hanging in the air. The thought terrified him more than he cared to admit. His phone buzzed again, another message from Suzanne asking if he'd finished the projections. He turned the phone face down without responding. The pressure built in his chest, that familiar tightness that had become his constant companion. The memory of last week's meeting floated into his mind. He'd presented a strategy so rushed, so obviously flawed, that even the interns exchanged glances. CEO Martin Foster had simply nodded and said, "Let's circle back when you've had time to think this through." Not anger, just disappointment. Somehow worse. Mark had never felt so exposed, so clearly revealed as someone running on empty. He stood up suddenly, walked to the window, and pushed it open. The salt air rushed in, cool against his face. The rhythmic sound of waves breaking and retreating filled the room. Something about their patient, eternal cycle caught his attention. They weren't hurrying. They weren't grinding themselves to dust, trying to reach the shore faster. They simply came and went, each wave complete in itself. A memory surfaced. His grandfather, a successful architect who designed buildings that still defined the city skyline. Mark had once asked him how he'd come up with such innovative designs. The old man had smiled and said, "I learned to sit and do nothing. Most people can't stand the stillness, but that's where the best ideas live." At the time, Mark had nodded politely while privately dismissing the advice as the luxury of a different generation. The breeze picked up, rustling papers on his desk. One floated to the floor, a note from his doctor about his rising blood pressure. "Consider lifestyle changes," it read clinically, understating the urgency the doctor had conveyed in person. Mark watched a seagull hover effortlessly on the updrafts, barely moving its wings yet staying aloft with apparent ease. Something shifted in him then, subtle but unmistakable. What if slowing down wasn't admitting defeat, but a strategic recalibration? What if the constant motion he'd valued so highly was actually preventing him from seeing the larger patterns, the deeper insights that could truly set his work apart? Perhaps stillness wasn't the enemy of accomplishment, but its forgotten ally. He closed his laptop with a decisive click and picked up a blank pad of paper. For the first time in years, he allowed himself to simply sit, to breathe, to let thoughts form without immediately acting on them. The tightness in his chest began to ease. The waves continued their eternal rhythm outside his window, neither hurried nor delayed, each one arriving exactly when it should. Could it be that in his relentless pursuit of productivity, he had actually been undermining his own success? The cost of constant motion. Have you ever watched those old-time plate spinners? They dash from pole to pole, spinning each plate just enough to keep it from crashing down. The audience holds its breath. One slip, one moment of inattention, and everything shatters. It's entertaining for 5 minutes. It's exhausting for a lifetime. This is what constant busyness does to us. Research consistently shows that perpetual activity without adequate rest diminishes cognitive function. Our brains literally slow down. Decision-making abilities falter. Memory suffers. The American Psychological Association reports that chronic stress, a common companion of overcommitment, impairs concentration and analytical thinking. We become less capable precisely when we're trying to do more. Like a credit card with mounting interest, the debt of constant hustle compounds silently. At first, you notice nothing. You power through fatigue, skip lunch, answer emails at midnight. The culture celebrates this. Rise and grind becomes your mantra. But your body keeps perfect accounts. Sleep debt accumulates. Relationships thin out. Creative thinking, which requires mental space and relaxation, withers away. What begins as productive momentum gradually transforms into a treadmill that's increasingly difficult to escape. Our professional performance suffers in measurable ways. Microsoft research found that after 40 hours of work per week, productivity plummets. Each additional hour yields diminishing returns until you're essentially spinning your wheels. Worse, the quality of your work deteriorates. Errors increase. Innovation decreases. The irony is painful. Working longer hours eventually produces worse results than if you had maintained reasonable boundaries. Constant motion is not the same as meaningful progress, and the price of confusing the two is higher than most of us can afford to pay. Recognizing when you're running on empty. The human body sends warning signals long before complete breakdown occurs. Ignoring these signals doesn't make them disappear. It only ensures the inevitable crash will be more devastating. Physical symptoms often appear first: persistent headaches, disrupted sleep patterns, digestive issues, and a weakened immune system that leaves you catching every cold that passes through the office. These physical manifestations are just the beginning. The Mayo Clinic identifies emotional exhaustion as a primary indicator of burnout. This isn't just feeling tired, it's a bone-deep depletion that sleep alone cannot remedy. You might notice yourself becoming cynical about your work or life in general. Tasks that once energized you now feel like insurmountable obstacles. Small frustrations trigger disproportionate emotional reactions. The joy drains from activities you previously loved. Your relationships become collateral damage in the war against rest. When was the last time you were fully present with someone you care about? Not checking your phone, not mentally reviewing your to-do list, but actually there? Chronic stress creates a self-absorption that's not selfish, but survival-oriented. Your focus narrows to just getting through the next thing, and the people around you fade into the background. Consider a car's dashboard warning lights. They're designed to alert you before catastrophic engine failure occurs. Your body has similar indicators: chronic insomnia, sudden weight changes, constant anxiety, unexplained aches. These are your personal check engine lights. They deserve the same immediate attention you'd give to a blinking alert on your vehicle's dashboard. Ignoring them doesn't make the underlying problem disappear. The World Health Organization now recognizes burnout as an occupational phenomenon characterized by 3 dimensions: feelings of energy depletion, increased mental distance from one's job, and reduced professional efficacy. This isn't just feeling stressed, it's a specific syndrome resulting from chronic workplace stress that hasn't been successfully managed. Picture a rubber band stretched to its limit. It might hold for a while, maintaining tension, doing its job. But eventually, one of 2 things happens. It either snaps suddenly or, after repeated stretching, loses its elasticity entirely and can never return to its original form. Your resilience works the same way. Push too far for too long, and recovery becomes not just difficult, but potentially impossible. What if the exhaustion you're feeling isn't a character flaw or lack of ambition, but your body's intelligence trying to save you from yourself? The mirror of experience. I once worked with a tech executive who prided himself on his 80-hour work weeks. "I'll sleep when I'm dead," he'd joke, gulping his 4th espresso before noon. His company had just secured major funding, and he was determined to make the most of the opportunity. 6 months later, he was in the hospital with stress-induced heart problems. He was 34. The funding meant nothing as he lay there, connected to monitors, wondering if he'd pushed too far. Our culture has normalized the abnormal. We celebrate the entrepreneur who hasn't taken a vacation in 5 years. We admire the parent who works full-time while pursuing a degree and volunteering on weekends. We've confused busyness with value, activity with achievement. The metrics are all wrong. Quantity has overshadowed quality, and we're paying for it with our well-being. Think of your attention like water. When spread too thin across too many fields, nothing truly thrives. When concentrated and directed intentionally, it creates abundance. Many of us are trying to irrigate vast territories with limited resources, then wondering why everything looks slightly withered. Perpetual hustle fragments our focus until we're doing many things poorly instead of a few things well. Look back at your own experiences. When did pushing harder actually move you backward? For me, it was writing my first book while maintaining a full client load and saying yes to speaking engagements. I met all my deadlines, but the quality suffered. Reviews mentioned the rushed feeling of certain chapters. My health deteriorated. Relationships strained. The success cost more than it was worth, and ironically, created more work later when portions needed extensive revision. Research from the University of California found that constant task switching, a hallmark of our overscheduled lives, can reduce productivity by up to 40%. Every time we jump between projects, emails, messages, and meetings, our brain requires time to reorient. We think we're being efficient, but we're actually creating a cognitive deficit that compounds throughout the day. By evening, we've worked harder but accomplished less than if we'd approached our work with strategic focus and appropriate breaks. Our relentless hustle creates the very problems we're hustling to solve: decreased effectiveness, impaired health, damaged relationships, and diminished joy, forming a self-perpetuating cycle that can only be broken through intentional stillness and strategic rest. The three-headed dragon. The evidence is clear and consistent across each dimension we've explored. First, constant busyness extracts an extreme cost, physically, mentally, and professionally. Your body can't sustain perpetual motion without breaking down. Your mind can't maintain clarity without space for integration and rest. Your work quality inevitably suffers when quantity becomes the primary measure of success. Second, burnout isn't just feeling tired. It's a progressive syndrome with recognizable symptoms that signal danger long before collapse. Physical ailments, emotional exhaustion, cynicism, reduced performance, and relationship strain form a constellation of warning signs that deserve immediate attention. These aren't weaknesses to push through, but intelligence to heed. Third, our personal experiences confirm what research demonstrates. The hustle culture's promises are often mirages. Real-world outcomes show that sustainable achievement requires rhythms of engagement and renewal, not constant acceleration. Our most painful setbacks frequently stem from ignoring our limits, while our most meaningful successes come when we work with our natural capacities rather than against them. The solution isn't working harder within a broken paradigm, but questioning the paradigm itself, recognizing that true productivity emerges not from perpetual motion, but from the powerful alternation of focused action and deliberate stillness. The myth of perpetual productivity. The modern workplace operates on a dangerous assumption that human beings can function like machines. We're expected to maintain consistent output regardless of circumstances, emotional state, physical health, time of day, or phase of life. This expectation isn't just unrealistic, it's biologically impossible. Humans aren't designed for constant performance. We operate in natural cycles, ultradian rhythms of roughly 90 to 120 minutes, where our energy and focus naturally ebb and flow throughout the day. Fighting these rhythms doesn't eliminate them, it just forces us to work against our biology, requiring more effort to produce lesser results. Think of your energy like the tides. When you try to swim against an outgoing tide, you exhaust yourself, making minimal progress. Work with the tide, and the same effort carries you much further. Many of us spend our professional lives fighting natural energy cycles, wondering why we're exhausted, yet accomplishing less than we believe we should. The costs extend beyond efficiency. A 2021 study in the Journal of Occupational Health Psychology found that employees who regularly worked more than 50 hours per week showed significantly higher rates of depression, anxiety, and sleep disorders compared to those working 35 to 40 hours. The psychological toll of overwork isn't just unpleasant, it's clinically significant. Relationships suffer too. When was the last time you were fully present with someone you care about? Not checking your phone, not mentally reviewing your to-do list, but actually there? The hustle culture encourages us to view relationships as either networking opportunities or interruptions to real work. Both perspectives miss the fundamental truth that meaningful connection is not ancillary to a good life. It is the good life. Human Potential Project research shows that workers who take regular breaks outperform their constantly working counterparts by an average of 16% in creative problem-solving tasks. Our most valuable insights often arrive not while actively wrestling with a problem, but during moments of mental relaxation when our subconscious can make connections our focused mind misses. Your worth is not measured by your constant availability, and your success is not determined by your willingness to sacrifice everything for productivity. The warning signs your body is sending. Your body communicates long before it breaks down. The question is, are you listening? Physical symptoms often appear first: persistent headaches that don't respond to pain relievers, sleep disturbances that leave you exhausted despite spending adequate time in bed, digestive issues that doctors classify as stress-related. These aren't random malfunctions. they're coordinated warning signals. Emotional indicators follow close behind. Irritability becomes your default setting. Small frustrations trigger disproportionate reactions. Activities you once enjoyed feel like obligations. You might notice increased cynicism about your work or life in general, a sense that nothing really matters or makes a difference. This emotional numbing is your mind's protective response to overwhelming demands. The World Health Organization now formally recognizes burnout as an occupational phenomenon characterized by three dimensions: feelings of energy depletion, increased mental distance from one's job, and reduced professional efficacy. This isn't just feeling stressed. It's a specific syndrome resulting from chronic workplace stress that hasn't been successfully managed. Cognitive symptoms often go unrecognized but are equally concerning. Decision fatigue sets in earlier each day. Your ability to focus narrows until even simple tasks require significant effort. Memory lapses become common. Creative thinking, which requires mental space and relaxation, becomes nearly impossible. Your mind, designed for brilliant adaptation and innovation, reduces to basic survival functioning. Like a car low on oil, you might keep moving forward through sheer momentum, but damage is accumulating beneath the surface. Each ignored warning light increases the likelihood of a breakdown that can't be easily repaired. The body keeps score, and eventually it demands payment for neglected maintenance. Relationships become collateral damage in the war against rest. You find yourself physically present, but mentally absent with loved ones. Conversations feel like one more task to complete rather than connections to nurture. Isolation increases, partly because you don't have time for social activities, and partly because the depleted version of yourself has less to offer in interaction. What vital message might your exhaustion be trying to deliver that could completely transform your approach to work and life? When the race defeats its purpose. I watched a colleague build an impressive consulting practice through relentless networking, client acquisition, and project delivery. James never said no to an opportunity. His calendar was perpetually full. His income grew impressively. Then one day, mid-presentation, he simply stopped speaking. The words wouldn't come. He stood before his client, mouth open, mind blank. It wasn't a stroke or any identifiable medical condition. His system had simply shut down after years of operating beyond capacity. The recovery took months. During that time, clients moved on. His reputation shifted from reliable expert to health risk. The financial consequences were significant, but the psychological impact was devastating. I thought I was building something, he told me later, but I was actually dismantling myself piece by piece. Our bodies and minds have built-in circuit breakers. When we ignore the smaller warnings, fatigue, irritability, minor health issues, these circuit breakers eventually trip. The shutdown is a protective mechanism, not a personal failing. It's your system's intelligence recognizing what you've refused to acknowledge. Sustainability matters more than short-term output. Consider the marathon runner who studies course conditions, plans nutrition, monitors pace, and respects recovery periods. They may finish behind the impulsive sprinter in the first mile, but they'll cross the finish line while the sprinter lies exhausted on the sidelines. Life isn't a series of independent sprints. It's an ultramarathon requiring strategic energy management and respect for biological reality. I've experienced this myself. 3 years into building my practice, I was working with high-profile clients, speaking at conferences, and developing new programs simultaneously. My calendar had no white space. Sleep became optional. I measured my worth by my output. When a minor cold developed into pneumonia that left me bedridden for weeks, I initially viewed it as an inconvenient interruption. Only later did I recognize it as inevitable, the predictable result of ignoring countless smaller warnings my body had been sending. The continual sacrifice of health, relationships, and joy on the altar of productivity creates a success that, once achieved, you may no longer be well enough to enjoy. The three dimensions of slow-motion disaster. We've traveled through the landscape of constant hustle and examined its hidden costs. The evidence reveals a consistent pattern. What our culture often celebrates as dedication and drive frequently leads to diminished results across all meaningful dimensions of life. This isn't occasional burnout. It's a systematic mismatch between human design and modern expectations. Physically, we've seen how overcommitment triggers a cascade of stress responses that compromise health, cognitive function, and overall resilience. The research is unambiguous. Sustained high stress periods without adequate recovery create biological debt that must eventually be repaid, often with interest in the form of serious health consequences. Emotionally, we've identified the warning signs that signal approaching burnout: emotional exhaustion, cynicism, detachment, irritability, and the gradual erosion of meaning and purpose. These aren't character flaws or signs of weakness. They're intelligent responses from a system operating beyond sustainable capacity for too long. Professionally, we've confronted the painful irony that working longer hours and taking on more commitments often produces worse results than maintaining reasonable boundaries. Quality suffers, creativity diminishes, decision-making deteriorates. The very success we're hustling to achieve becomes less attainable through the methods we're using to pursue it. The path forward isn't about working harder within a broken paradigm, but about fundamentally reimagining success, recognizing that sustainable achievement emerges not from perpetual motion, but from the strategic integration of focused action and deliberate stillness. The breaking point is a turning point. The relentless pace of modern life isn't sustainable. This isn't just opinion, it's biology. Our bodies and minds weren't designed for perpetual motion, constant connection, and chronic stress. The damage compounds silently until it doesn't. You've likely recognized some warning signs in your own life. The mental fog that doesn't lift after another cup of coffee. The relationships that have cooled because you're too busy. The creative spark that once defined your work, now diminished to a flicker. But here's what matters. Recognizing these patterns isn't admitting defeat, it's claiming power. The moments when you feel most overwhelmed are precisely when you need to pause, not push harder. Throughout this chapter, we've examined how constant hustle damages your health, creativity, relationships, and ultimately, your results. We've identified the early and late warning signs of burnout that society often rewards as dedication, and we've reflected on those moments when pushing through actually pushed us backward. The stillness advantage isn't about doing less, it's about achieving more by doing better. Quality over quantity, depth over breadth, impact over activity. Your next chapter begins with a pause. As we move forward in this book, you'll discover that strategic stillness isn't some luxury reserved for those who can afford to step back. It's a non-negotiable requirement for sustained excellence and innovation in any field. In the coming chapters, you'll learn how to create pockets of stillness in even the busiest schedule, the neuroscience behind why pauses dramatically improve performance, practical techniques to quiet mental chatter and access deeper insights, ways to communicate your boundaries without damaging relationships, how to transform reactive habits into proactive rhythms. The most successful people aren't those who never stop, they're those who stop with purpose. They understand that breakthroughs happen in the spaces between effort, not just during it. The greatest advantage in our hyper-accelerated world isn't speed, it's clarity. And clarity comes from stillness. You picked up this book because something in your current approach isn't working. Perhaps you're achieving success by conventional standards, but feeling empty inside. Maybe you're watching opportunities slip by because you're too overwhelmed to notice them. Or you might be seeing the first signs of physical and mental decline that come from perpetual overdrive. Whatever brought you here, know this: the simple act of pausing contains more power than you've been led to believe. The path to your most meaningful work, deepest connections, and authentic success doesn't run through endless hustle. It winds through moments of deliberate stillness. And that journey begins now, with your next breath. Let's turn the page on constant motion and discover what happens when we finally allow ourselves to stop, reflect, and then move forward with intention. Chapter 2: Reclaiming Your Rhythm, the Case for Stillness. When rushing becomes the ultimate roadblock. Speed isn't the enemy, mindless speed is. In a world that celebrates constant motion, we've forgotten a fundamental truth. Effectiveness requires clarity before action. Professionals today wear busyness like a badge of honor, confusing frantic activity with meaningful progress. The facts tell a different story. Research consistently shows that our most innovative solutions and clearest decisions emerge not from perpetual motion, but from strategic stillness. This isn't about working less, it's about working right. The modern workplace has normalized a dangerous paradigm: move fast, think later, if at all. We respond to emails while on conference calls, schedule meetings back to back, and boast about our ability to multitask, a cognitive myth that science has thoroughly debunked. The result is predictable: diminished creativity, increased errors, and the peculiar phenomenon of working longer hours while accomplishing less of what truly matters. The stillness advantage represents the counterintuitive solution to this productivity paradox. What we've lost in our acceleration is the natural rhythm that governs all effective human performance. Athletes understand this intuitively. Training requires recovery. Creative professionals recognize this too. Inspiration demands incubation. Yet in business and professional contexts, we've somehow convinced ourselves that continuous output without input is sustainable. It isn't. The human mind operates like any other complex system. It requires periods of engagement and disengagement to function optimally. Our bodies offer wisdom our schedules ignore. Circadian rhythms, ultradian cycles, and attention spans aren't suggestions. They're biological realities. When we force ourselves to maintain constant productivity against these natural patterns, we don't overcome our limitations. We compound them. The physical and psychological benefits of incorporating stillness aren't luxury add-ons to a successful career. They're foundational to sustainable high performance. The research is unambiguous. Regular periods of mental rest improve cognitive function, emotional regulation, and creative problem solving. Modern work environments have drifted dramatically from what our biology requires. Open-plan offices, notification-heavy devices, and cultures that reward visibility over results create conditions directly opposed to deep work and clear thinking. This mismatch between our biological needs and professional expectations creates the stress, burnout, and diminished capacity that plague today's workforce. Reconnecting with natural rhythms isn't just a wellness concern, it's a performance imperative. The challenge, of course, is practical implementation. How do we integrate stillness into already packed schedules? Where does the pause fit when deadlines loom and expectations mount? This chapter will offer concrete strategies for building stillness into even the busiest professional life, not as an escape from productivity, but as its enabler. We'll explore techniques that range from micro pauses throughout the workday to more substantial stillness practices that create the mental space for breakthrough thinking. The stillness advantage isn't about abandoning ambition or lowering expectations. Quite the opposite. It's about raising them. By understanding how clarity precedes effective action, we create the conditions for excellence rather than exhaustion. In the coming pages, we'll examine how the most successful professionals aren't those who work without stopping, but those who've mastered the rhythmic dance between focused action and strategic stillness. Their secret isn't superhuman stamina, but superior recovery, the ability to return to challenges with renewed perspective and energy. The stillness advantage isn't just about surviving in a fast-paced world. It's about thriving in it, reclaiming your natural edge, the illusion of momentum. The office pressed around him, all glass and steel and ambition. Thomas Miller leaned back in his leather chair, staring at the wall of email notifications flooding his monitor. The quiet hum of the air conditioner competed with the rapid tapping of keyboards from the adjoining cubicles. His coffee had grown cold, forgotten during the barrage of morning meetings. He rubbed his eyes. 3 project deadlines loomed, and his team scrambled in all directions. They moved fast. Thomas had always prided himself on running a department that made things happen, but the results grew increasingly disappointing. The last project had required 2 complete overhauls after launch. Management noticed. "We're spinning our wheels," he thought, remembering his father's old truck stuck in mud, digging itself deeper with each desperate acceleration. The memory brought with it the smell of wet earth and his father's patient voice. "Sometimes you gotta stop pushing and think about the problem, Tommy." A notification pinged. His boss wanted the strategic plan by end of day. Thomas reached for his phone to message the team, then stopped. His fingers hovered over the screen. The sunlight shifted through the blinds, casting thin prison bar shadows across his desk. He needed clarity, not more motion. He set the phone down and closed his laptop. The team glanced up, surprised, when he walked to the whiteboard and uncapped a marker. "Let's stop for a minute," he said. "We're moving fast, but I'm not sure we're moving forward." Lisa from marketing looked relieved. "I was thinking the same thing. We've been running so hard I can't remember what we're chasing anymore." Thomas drew a simple line on the board. "What if we took half a day? No emails, no calls, and figured out what actually matters for this project." The idea felt dangerous, radical even, in their hyperactive workplace culture. But as he spoke, he felt something shift in his chest. The constant weight of urgency lifted slightly. For the first time in months, he felt the space to think. Outside his window, the city raced on. Cars honked, people hurried between meetings, the whole world pushed forward at breakneck speed. But inside this glass-walled conference room, Thomas and his team created a deliberate pause, not to slow progress, but to ensure their speed carried meaning. The whiteboard slowly filled with clarity. What would happen, Thomas wondered, if they measured success not by how busy they appeared, but by how clearly they moved toward their true objectives? The body and mind in balance. Our bodies and minds weren't designed for the relentless pace of modern life. The constant alerts, endless meetings, and perpetual connectivity have created an unprecedented state of chronic activation. Research shows that this sustained stress triggers our sympathetic nervous system, our fight or flight response, causing elevated cortisol levels, increased heart rate, and heightened blood pressure. When these physiological responses become our baseline, we're setting ourselves up for burnout, diminished cognitive performance, and compromised immune function. Imagine your mind as a glass of water with sediment constantly being stirred. When in perpetual motion, the water remains cloudy, making it impossible to see clearly to the bottom. Only when the glass is still does the sediment settle, allowing clarity to emerge. This is what happens in our minds when we intentionally pause. The mental chatter subsides, and clarity emerges from the stillness. The physical benefits of incorporating stillness extend well beyond stress reduction. Regular periods of rest activate our parasympathetic nervous system, often called rest and digest, which counterbalances the stress response. Studies have shown that practices promoting stillness, such as meditation, deep breathing, and mindful movement, can lower blood pressure, reduce inflammation, improve sleep quality, and even enhance cellular repair processes. These physiological changes don't just make us feel better momentarily, they create lasting improvements in our overall health and resilience. Our cognitive abilities sharpen dramatically when we allow ourselves periods of stillness. The brain's default mode network, active when we're not focused on external tasks, plays a crucial role in creativity, problem solving, and emotional processing. By deliberately stepping away from constant stimulation, we give this network the space to function optimally. This explains why solutions often come to us in the shower, during a walk, or upon waking, times when our minds are relatively quiet and undirected. Stillness practices also strengthen our attention muscles. In a world designed to fragment our focus, the ability to direct and sustain attention has become a rare and valuable skill. Neuroscience research has demonstrated that regular meditation and other stillness practices increase gray matter density in brain regions associated with attention, sensory processing, and self-awareness. These structural changes translate to functional improvements in concentration, emotional regulation, and cognitive flexibility, all critical capabilities for thriving in complex environments. When we pause, we create space for integration. Our brains need time to process experiences, connect disparate pieces of information, and create meaning from the constant input we receive. Without these integration periods, we become information collectors rather than wisdom cultivators. The stillness advantage lies in this transformation, turning raw data and experiences into genuine insight and understanding that can guide our actions. The psychological benefits of stillness extend into our relationships as well. When we're constantly rushed and distracted, we struggle to be fully present with others. The quality of our connections suffers, creating a sense of isolation even amid constant contact. Regular stillness practices enhance our capacity for presence, empathy, and deep listening. the foundations of meaningful human connection. By becoming more centered within ourselves, we paradoxically become more available to others. Many high achievers resist stillness because they equate it with unproductivity. Yet the evidence suggests precisely the opposite. Strategic pauses enhance productivity rather than diminish it. Like interval training for athletes, where periods of intense exertion alternate with recovery, cognitive performance improves when focused work alternates with deliberate rest. The stillness advantage isn't about doing less. It's about accomplishing more by working with our natural rhythms rather than against them. The power of stillness lies not in escape from life's demands, but in developing the capacity to meet them with greater clarity, creativity, and resilience. The rhythm of nature versus the cadence of modernity. Our bodies operate according to intricate natural rhythms that have evolved over millennia. The most fundamental of these is the circadian rhythm, our internal 24-hour clock that regulates sleep-wake cycles, hormone production, body temperature, and countless other physiological processes. When aligned with natural light-dark cycles, these rhythms support optimal functioning across all body systems. Yet modern work environments rarely acknowledge, much less accommodate, these biological imperatives. The natural human ultradian rhythm dictates that we can maintain focused attention for approximately 90 to 120 minutes before requiring a period of rest and recovery. After this peak performance window, our bodies send signals requesting downtime, mental fatigue, physical restlessness, hunger, or drowsiness. These aren't signs of weakness or insufficient willpower. They're sophisticated biological feedback mechanisms designed to maintain sustainable energy use and prevent burnout. But when was the last time your workday honored these natural cycles? Instead, we've created environments that demand continuous high performance regardless of biological reality. The 8-hour or longer workday, back-to-back meetings, constant digital interruptions, and normalized sleep deprivation all represent profound disconnections from our physiological design. We've structured our professional lives as though humans were machines capable of consistent output regardless of circumstances, an assumption that biology simply doesn't support. Think of your energy as a wave rather than a straight line. Natural productivity ebbs and flows throughout the day, with predictable peaks and valleys. Forcing consistent high performance is like trying to flatten these waves, an exercise that requires tremendous energy while producing diminishing returns. When we work with our natural rhythms instead of against them, we harness the power of the tide rather than exhausting ourselves fighting it. The consequences of this mismatch between natural rhythms and modern work demands are increasingly evident. Rates of burnout, anxiety, depression, and stress-related physical ailments continue to rise across professions. A 2021 American Psychological Association survey found that 79% of employees had experienced work-related stress in the month prior, with nearly 3 in 5 reporting negative impacts on their motivation, energy, and productivity. These statistics don't represent individual failings, but rather a systemic disregard for human biological realities. Our bodies also operate according to seasonal rhythms, with natural variations in energy, mood, and cognitive function throughout the year. Historically, human activity patterns shifted with the seasons. More active in summer's abundant light and energy, more restful and internally focused during winter's darkness. Today's workplace, however, maintains identical expectations year-round, with artificial lighting, temperature control, and constant productivity demands regardless of season. Technology has further accelerated this disconnect from natural rhythm. The average professional now checks their phone 96 times daily, approximately once every 10 minutes. Each check represents a potential interruption to natural thought processes and flow states. Meanwhile, artificial light from screens disrupts melatonin production, delaying sleep onset and reducing sleep quality. The result is a workforce increasingly detached from both external natural cues and internal biological signals. Corporate cultures often reinforce these unhealthy patterns by celebrating overwork and constant availability. The professional who sends emails at midnight or works through weekends is frequently praised for dedication rather than recognized as someone potentially headed for collapse. This cultural valorization of exhaustion creates a powerful social incentive to ignore our body's wisdom in favor of unsustainable performance standards. The irony is that this disregard for natural rhythms ultimately undermines the very productivity it aims to enhance. Research from Microsoft's Human Factors Lab found that back-to-back virtual meetings significantly increase brainwave markers associated with stress and mental fatigue while reducing engagement. Similarly, studies show that performance on complex cognitive tasks decreases dramatically after extended periods without breaks, with error rates increasing and creative problem-solving declining. Reclaiming your natural rhythm doesn't require abandoning professional ambition or productivity goals. Rather, it means working smarter by aligning effort with your body's innate wisdom. The most effective professionals aren't those who push hardest against their biological limitations, but those who strategically harness their natural energy cycles for maximum impact. They understand that sustainable high performance comes not from constant exertion, but from the rhythmic alternation between focused effort and genuine renewal. What might be possible in your work and life if you stopped fighting your natural rhythms and instead designed your days to work in harmony with them? The integration of stillness into daily life. The greatest barrier to incorporating stillness isn't lack of time. It's our relationship with time itself. We've been conditioned to equate busyness with importance and productivity with worth. This mindset turns every unfilled moment into an opportunity for more doing, more producing, more achieving. Breaking this pattern requires recognizing that stillness isn't the absence of productivity, but rather its foundation. Research consistently shows that strategic pauses enhance overall performance rather than diminishing it. A 2011 University of Illinois study found that brief diversions from tasks dramatically improved participants' ability to maintain focus over extended periods. Similarly, a Microsoft research study demonstrated that software developers who took regular breaks completed their tasks with better code quality and greater efficiency than those who worked continuously. These findings contradict our cultural assumption that more hours equal more output. Integration of stillness doesn't require dramatic lifestyle overhauls or hours of meditation. Small, strategic pauses throughout the day can yield significant benefits. The key is consistency and intentionality, making these moments non-negotiable aspects of your routine rather than afterthoughts when time permits. Even 60 seconds of conscious breathing between meetings can reset your nervous system and refresh your mental focus. Consider the difference between scheduled and emergent stillness. Scheduled stillness involves deliberately setting aside time for reflection, meditation, or simply being. Emergent stillness involves recognizing and utilizing the natural pauses that already exist in your day. The moments waiting for coffee to brew, standing in line, or transitioning between tasks. Both forms are valuable, and a balanced approach incorporates each. The AERA framework: awareness, assessment, action, readjustment. The Stillness Integration Framework provides a structured approach to incorporating meaningful pauses into even the busiest lifestyle. This four-part cyclical process creates sustainable change by meeting you where you are, while progressively building your capacity for effective stillness practices. Component 1: awareness. The journey begins with awareness, both of your current relationship with stillness and the potential benefits of changing it. Many professionals operate on autopilot, unconsciously reacting to external demands without recognizing their internal state. Cultivating awareness means developing the ability to notice when you're operating from a place of frenetic energy versus centered clarity. Signs that indicate a need for stillness include racing thoughts, difficulty concentrating, emotional reactivity, physical tension, and decision fatigue. Learning to recognize these signals before they escalate allows you to implement stillness practices proactively rather than waiting for burnout to force a pause. Awareness also encompasses understanding the science behind stillness benefits, which helps transform these practices from seeming optional to essential. Recognizing that regular pauses enhance cognitive performance, creativity, and decision-making quality reframes stillness as a strategic advantage rather than an indulgence. This component serves as the foundation for the entire framework, Without awareness, attempts at integration will likely be sporadic and unsustained. By developing this conscious attention to your internal state and external patterns, you create the conditions for meaningful change. Component 2, Assessment. With heightened awareness established, the assessment phase involves systematically evaluating your current patterns and identifying optimal integration points for stillness practices. This isn't about judging yourself, but rather gathering accurate information to inform effective strategy. Begin by mapping your typical day, noting energy fluctuations, high stress periods, and existing transition points. Identify your personal energy drains, activities or situations that consistently deplete your resources, and energy gains, those that restore and revitalize you. This mapping process reveals natural opportunities for incorporating stillness without disrupting productivity. Assessment also involves honest evaluation of your current barriers to stillness. These might include environmental factors, noisy workspace, constant interruptions, psychological barriers, discomfort with unstructured time, fear of falling behind, or practical constraints, caregiving responsibilities, demanding schedules. Understanding these specific challenges allows you to develop targeted solutions rather than generic approaches. This component transforms stillness integration from abstract intention to concrete planning. By clearly understanding your current reality, you can design practices that work with your life rather than against it. Component 3, Action. The action phase is where intention meets implementation through specific, sustainable stillness practices. The key principle here is progressive integration, starting with manageable changes and gradually expanding as your capacity develops. Begin with micro stillness practices of 1 to 3 minutes that can be seamlessly incorporated into existing routines. These might include 3 deep breaths before checking email, a brief body scan between meetings, or a moment of conscious presence before entering your home at day's end. Their brevity makes them difficult to dismiss with the no time excuse, while their strategic placement creates natural transition points in your day. As these micro practices become habitual, expand to incorporating mini stillness sessions of 5 to 15 minutes. These might include a morning meditation, midday reflection walk, or evening journaling practice. The goal is to create protected pockets of time that allow for deeper renewal without requiring major schedule restructuring. For sustainable implementation, link new stillness practices to existing habits, a technique known as habit stacking, and use environmental cues to trigger remembrance. For example, place a small symbol on your computer to remind you to pause before beginning work, or set your phone background as a stillness prompt. This component transforms knowledge into lived experience. While awareness and assessment create the foundation, action is where transformation occurs through consistent practice and experimentation. Component 4, Readjustment. The final component acknowledges that integration is an evolving process rather than a one-time implementation. Readjustment involves regularly evaluating your stillness practices, noting what's working, what isn't, and how your needs may be changing. Set aside time monthly to reflect on your stillness practice using both subjective measures, how you feel, qualitative changes in your experience, and objective indicators, sleep quality, productivity metrics, relationship satisfaction. This evaluation isn't about perfect adherence, but rather honest assessment of what's creating value in your life. Based on this reflection, make deliberate adjustments to your approach. This might mean trying different stillness practices, adjusting their timing or duration, addressing new barriers, or expanding successful elements. The key is maintaining flexibility while continuing to prioritize the overall goal of integrated stillness. This component prevents the common pattern of enthusiastic beginnings followed by gradual abandonment. By building in regular reassessment and adjustment, the framework becomes self-sustaining and responsive to life's changing demands. The cyclical nature of the hour framework means that readjustment naturally leads back to deepened awareness, continuing the spiral of development. Each cycle builds upon the previous one, gradually transforming your relationship with stillness from occasional practice to integrated way of being. The interconnection between components creates a self-reinforcing system. Greater awareness leads to more accurate assessment, which enables more effective action generating clear results for readjustment, which in turn enhances awareness. This positive feedback loop supports sustainable change even amidst busy professional lives. By integrating strategic stillness through the ARA framework, you create the paradoxical advantage of accomplishing more by doing less, as your actions become increasingly grounded in clarity, purpose, and natural rhythm rather than reactive busyness. The paradox of productive stillness. We face a fundamental paradox in our relationship with stillness. The times we feel we can least afford to pause are precisely when we most need to. When deadlines loom, stakeholders demand attention, and responsibilities multiply, our instinct is to push harder, move faster, and squeeze more activity into each moment. Yet, it's in these high-pressure periods that a strategic pause delivers its greatest value, providing the clarity, perspective, and renewed energy needed to navigate complexity effectively. The science of performance reveals why this counterintuitive approach works. Under sustained pressure, our cognitive resources deplete progressively, leading to diminished decision quality, increased error rates, and narrowed creative thinking. Studies from performance psychology show that our brains function optimally when alternating between focused attention and deliberate recovery. The stillness advantage lies in this oscillation, not in constant exertion. Strategic integration of stillness doesn't mean abandoning ambition or lowering performance standards. Quite the opposite. It means achieving better results through working with our biological design rather than against it. Top performers across domains, from elite athletes to groundbreaking scientists to successful executives, share a common trait. They understand that optimal performance comes not from continuous effort, but from the rhythmic alternation between intense focus and genuine renewal. Implementing stillness practices requires overcoming both external obstacles, busy schedules, environmental distractions, and internal resistance, productivity guilt, FOMO, discomfort with quiet. The strategies outlined in the ARA framework provide a structured approach to addressing both sets of challenges, making stillness accessible even amid demanding professional lives. The stillness advantage transforms our entire relationship with work and life, physically restoring our body's natural rhythms, cognitively enhancing our decision-making capacity, and psychologically reframing our understanding of productivity itself. Finding your way back to balance. The relentless pace of modern life has convinced us that constant motion equals progress, but this chapter has revealed a fundamental truth. Your effectiveness diminishes when speed lacks clarity. The distinction between busyness and true productivity isn't subtle, it's profound. Your body has natural rhythms that modern work environments consistently override. When you ignore these rhythms, you pay with your health, creativity, and ultimately, your success. The research is clear. Strategic stillness isn't merely a luxury, it's essential infrastructure for sustainable achievement. The practices we've explored aren't about abandoning ambition. Rather, they're about amplifying your impact through intentional pauses. These moments of stillness create the space needed for insight to emerge, for stress to dissipate, and for your most valuable contributions to take shape. What makes these techniques powerful is their adaptability. Whether it's the 2-minute breathing reset between meetings, the daily technology blackout, or the weekly reflection ritual, these practices work because they're designed to integrate with your existing routines, not compete with them. Remember that clarity precedes effective action. Without it, you're simply burning resources on motion that may take you further from your true objectives. The stillness practices you've learned create the conditions for that clarity to emerge naturally. The choice before you isn't whether to work hard or rest more. It's understanding that these aren't opposing forces, but complementary ones. Your most brilliant work will emerge from the rhythm of engagement and release, push and pause, that mimics the natural world's most sustainable patterns. As you move forward, consider that your most significant competitive advantage might not be how much you can do, but how deliberately you can pause. In a world that rewards reactivity, your capacity for thoughtful response becomes increasingly valuable. Those who master stillness don't fall behind. They simply operate from a different paradigm, one that prioritizes effectiveness over the appearance of productivity. The path forward is clear. Integrate these stillness practices into your daily rhythm. Start small. Be consistent. Notice what changes. Your body, mind, and work will transform not through dramatic overhaul, but through the steady accumulation of moments when you choose clarity over chaos, presence over distraction, and effectiveness over mere activity. The advantage is waiting. The only question is whether you'll claim it. Chapter 3: Breaking the Addiction to Digital Dopamine. Are you awake or just digitally alive? In today's hyper-connected reality, we've traded the gift of presence for the illusion of digital omnipresence. Each notification, each scroll, each like, they're not just disruptions, they've become the very rhythm that dictates our days. This constant digital stimulation has rewired our neural pathways, creating what neuroscientists now recognize as addiction patterns identical to those found in substance dependencies. The average person checks their phone 96 times daily. That's once every 10 minutes of waking life. We're not just distracted, we're neurologically tethered to devices that promise connection but deliver fragmentation. The consequences extend far beyond wasted time. Digital overstimulation systematically erodes our capacity for deep thought, creativity, and innovation, the very qualities that define human potential and drive meaningful progress. When our brains become accustomed to constant digital dopamine hits, they grow resistant to the natural rewards that come from sustained focus and intellectual breakthrough. Silicon Valley executives who design these addictive platforms often prohibit their own children from using the very products they create, a telling contradiction that speaks volumes about what's at stake. The fundamental paradox is clear. The tools promising to make us more productive and connected have instead made us more scattered and isolated. Companies like Google and 3M didn't establish their innovative edges through more screen time. They did so by deliberately creating space for stillness and unfettered thinking. Google's famous 20% time policy, which allowed engineers to pursue projects unrelated to their core responsibilities, yielded innovations like Gmail and Google News. 3M's 15% culture produced Post-it notes and countless other breakthroughs. These companies understand what many of us have forgotten. Innovation happens in the spaces between digital distractions. This chapter offers a pathway back to mental clarity and forward to heightened creativity. We'll first examine how digital dependence reshapes neural pathways and diminishes our cognitive capabilities. You'll learn to recognize the subtle but powerful ways that notification-driven living undermines your ability to think strategically and solve complex problems. The research is unambiguous. When we allow our attention to be constantly fragmented, we sacrifice the cognitive resources needed for breakthrough thinking. We'll then explore practical digital detox strategies that have been field-tested in high-performance environments. These aren't abstract concepts, but actionable techniques used by executives, entrepreneurs, and creatives who understand that competitive advantage comes from strategic stillness. You'll discover how even short periods of digital disconnection can reset dopamine sensitivity and restore natural creativity cycles. Some approaches may surprise you, like how scheduled disconnection paradoxically leads to better connection, or how apparent unproductivity often generates the most valuable insights. Finally, we'll help you develop a personalized framework for sustainable digital balance. This isn't about abandoning technology, but mastering it, creating boundaries that serve your highest goals rather than corporate algorithms. You'll learn to implement specific practices that protect your mental environment without sacrificing necessary connectivity. The goal isn't digital abstinence, but digital intentionality, using technology as the tool it was meant to be, not becoming the tool yourself. The path forward isn't about perfection, but progress. Small, consistent steps toward digital mindfulness compound into remarkable cognitive shifts. As you begin to break free from compulsive digital engagement, you'll rediscover mental capacities that may have been dormant for years. Clarity returns, ideas flow, solutions emerge. The competitive advantage of stillness becomes not just theoretical, but experiential. The question isn't whether you can afford to step back from digital overwhelm, it's whether you can afford not to. Let's begin the journey of reclaiming your attention and redirecting it toward what truly matters. Your most valuable contributions to your work, relationships, and world won't come from another hour of scrolling. They'll emerge from the stillness you create and protect. The stillness between thoughts. Thomas Reed stood at the window of his office, looking out at the city below. The late afternoon sun cast long shadows across the streets, turning the glass buildings into mirrors that reflected gold and orange light. He loosened his tie and breathed deeply. The quarterly report numbers haunted him, hovering in his mind like ghosts. Innovation had stalled. The company that had once led the market now chased its competitors. 3 meetings back to back, he muttered to himself, rubbing his temples, and not a single useful idea from any of them. The tension in his shoulders had knotted into a familiar ache. Thomas turned from the window and paced across the carpet, his footsteps silent in the emptiness of his corner office. The walls were lined with awards and certificates that now seemed to mock him. His phone buzzed. A text from Elaine. "Don't forget dinner with the Jacobsons, 7:30. Thomas sighed. He'd forgotten entirely. The thought of small talk about vacation homes and private schools made his stomach tighten. He set the phone down and closed his eyes. What he needed was a breakthrough, something to revitalize the product line, something their competitors hadn't thought of yet. The memory of an article he'd read months ago surfaced about how Google implemented 20% time for employees to work on whatever interested them. Projects born from that stillness had become Gmail and Google Maps. Thomas had dismissed it then as luxury thinking. "We don't have time for people to daydream," he'd told his executive team. Now he wondered if that had been his first mistake. He remembered his early days in the company, sketching ideas while sitting by the lake near his first apartment. The stillness of the water had somehow opened something in his mind. His best concepts had come not from brainstorming sessions, but from those quiet moments when his mind was allowed to wander. The building had emptied out hours ago. Thomas walked to the design floor, rows of desks with ergonomic chairs and dual monitors, everything organized for maximum efficiency, everything except space for thought, for stillness. He picked up a marker and approached the whiteboard that dominated the far wall. Instead of writing a to-do list or drawing a process diagram, he simply wrote, "What if we stopped?" The words stared back at him, simultaneously terrifying and liberating. What if, instead of pushing harder, they paused? What if, instead of more meetings, they created space for reflection? The pressure to produce had squeezed out the gaps where inspiration once flourished. Thomas sat in one of the designer's chairs and simply breathed, letting his mind drift without direction. The silence of the office wrapped around him, not oppressive, but welcoming. The hum of the air conditioning became a meditation tone. An image formed in his mind, not of a product or a service, but of a space. A room in their building dedicated to nothing. No computers, no whiteboards, no purpose except stillness. A place where employees could go when they needed to step away, to think, to let their minds wander down unexpected paths. Thomas felt his breath deepen as the idea took shape. The innovation they sought wouldn't come from pushing harder into the same strategies. It would emerge from the spaces between effort, like music depends not just on notes, but on the silence between them. Outside, the city lights began to flicker on as darkness gathered. Thomas stood and walked back to the whiteboard. Beneath his first question, he wrote, "What grows in the space between thoughts?" The digital tsunami. Understanding overstimulation. The average American checks their smartphone 96 times a day, approximately once every 10 minutes. This constant engagement with digital devices has fundamentally altered our brain chemistry. Each notification, like, and message triggers a small dopamine release, creating a reward cycle that keeps us coming back for more. Over time, this perpetual stimulation has profound effects on our ability to focus, reflect, and engage in deep thinking. Research from the University of California found that after an interruption, it takes an average of 23 minutes to fully regain concentration on the original task. Imagine your mind as a once calm lake, now constantly disturbed by countless small stones, each representing a notification, email alert, or social media update. The ripples never cease, never allowing the surface to settle into stillness. This is the state of many modern minds, perpetually disturbed, never achieving the glassy calm needed to reflect clearly or see deeply below the surface. The constant agitation prevents us from accessing our deeper cognitive resources. The physiological impact of digital overstimulation extends beyond mere distraction. Studies have linked excessive screen time to increased levels of cortisol, our primary stress hormone. When cortisol remains elevated for extended periods, it can lead to anxiety, depression, sleep disturbances, and impaired decision making. A 2019 study published in JAMA Psychiatry established a clear correlation between increased screen time and higher rates of depression in adolescents. For adults, the consequences often manifest as chronic stress, reduced productivity, and diminished life satisfaction. This digital dependency creates an artificial environment far removed from the conditions in which our brains evolved. For thousands of years, humans existed in environments where stimulation was intermittent and meaningful. A rustle in the bushes might indicate danger or food. Today, we face hundreds of digital rustles that rarely signify anything truly important. Yet our brain's ancient alerting system doesn't discriminate. It responds to each digital notification as if it might be crucial for survival. This constant false alarming exhausts our mental resources and keeps us in a perpetual state of low-grade fight-or-flight arousal. Digital overstimulation doesn't just fragment our attention, it fundamentally rewires our brains, creating dependency patterns that undermine our mental health, cognitive abilities, and capacity for sustained focus and creativity. Breaking free, digital detox strategies. Digital detoxes have emerged as powerful interventions to combat technology dependence. These structured breaks from technology can range from a few hours to several weeks. Research from the University of Copenhagen found that even a one-week break from social media led to significant improvements in life satisfaction and positive emotions. The effectiveness lies not just in the temporary absence of technology, but in the reset it provides to our dopamine systems and attention patterns. What happens when you step away from the constant ping of notifications? Initially, many people experience withdrawal symptoms similar to those associated with other addictive substances. Anxiety, restlessness, and even phantom vibration syndrome, where you imagine your phone is buzzing when it's not, are common in the first 24 to 48 hours. This discomfort is actually evidence of how deeply dependent we've become on digital stimulation. Think of your relationship with technology as similar to a diet. Just as we need nutritional awareness about what we put into our bodies, we need digital nutrition awareness about what we put into our minds. Some digital consumption is essential and healthy, while other types are the equivalent of junk food, momentarily satisfying but ultimately harmful when consumed in excess. A digital detox acts like a cleanse, resetting your system and allowing you to develop more mindful consumption habits moving forward. Practical detox strategies vary in intensity and approach. The Tech Sabbath, a 24-hour period, typically on weekends where all non-essential technology is avoided, offers a manageable entry point. More ambitious approaches include digital fasting from specific platforms like social media for extended periods, or location-based boundaries, such as keeping devices out of bedrooms and dining areas. The key is to start with manageable changes and gradually expand your comfort zone with technology-free periods. The most successful detox strategies focus not just on eliminating technology, but on replacing it with meaningful alternatives. Nature exposure has proven particularly effective. Studies show that just 20 minutes in natural settings significantly lowers cortisol levels and improves mood. Face-to-face social interaction, physical exercise, creative pursuits, and mindfulness practices all help fill the void left by technology while actively restoring cognitive resources that digital overstimulation depletes. For many, the greatest challenge isn't the detox itself, but maintaining healthier digital habits afterward. This is where intentional reintegration becomes crucial. Rather than returning to previous usage patterns, successful detoxers deliberately reintroduce technology with new boundaries. These might include time-blocking techniques, where technology use is confined to specific periods, using apps that monitor and limit screen time, or creating technology-free zones and times within daily routines. The goal isn't technological abstinence, but technological intentionality. Companies like Google, Microsoft, and Apple have recognized the problem of digital overwhelm and have responded with tools to help users manage their digital consumption. Features like Screen Time on iOS, Digital Wellbeing on Android, and Focus Assist on Windows allow users to set limits on app usage, schedule downtime, and filter notifications. While these tools can be helpful, they represent an interesting paradox: using technology to solve problems created by technology. True digital well-being requires not just better tools, but a fundamental shift in our relationship with technology. What would your life look like if you designed your relationship with technology around your highest priorities, rather than allowing technology to dictate your attention and time? Creating your digital sanity plan. Developing a personal plan to reduce digital dependency begins with honest self-assessment. Track your current usage patterns for 1 week, noting not just time spent on devices, but also when, why, and how you use them. Most smartphones now have built-in screen time analytics that can provide a sobering look at your digital consumption. Pay special attention to unconscious habits. How often do you check your phone within 5 minutes of waking? During meals? In the middle of conversations? This awareness creates the foundation for meaningful change. Your notification settings represent the front line in reclaiming your attention. The default state of most apps is to demand your attention constantly, a design choice that serves their business models, not your well-being. Review and ruthlessly prune your notification settings. Consider allowing notifications only from actual people, messages, calls, rather than automated systems, likes, news alerts, marketing. Remember that each notification interrupts your thought process and trains your brain to expect constant novel stimulation. The spaces around us shape our behaviors more powerfully than most realize. Creating technology-free zones in your home, particularly bedrooms and dining areas, can dramatically reduce unconscious usage. The visual presence of devices triggers habitual checking behaviors, which is why physically removing them from certain spaces is more effective than merely trying to use willpower to resist them. Many find that purchasing a simple alarm clock to replace phone alarms eliminates the temptation to check devices first thing in the morning and last thing at night. Consider your digital ecosystem like a garden that needs regular tending. Just as weeds will overtake an untended garden, attention-grabbing apps and services will fill every available moment, if not regularly pruned back. Schedule monthly digital decluttering sessions where you review apps, subscriptions, email lists, and social media connections. For each, ask, does this serve my priorities and well-being, or does it primarily serve its own interests at my expense? Be particularly wary of free services. Remember that if you're not paying for the product, you usually are the product. Many find success with the concept of technology fasting and feasting. Rather than attempting moderate use throughout the day, which often fails due to the addictive design of these platforms, completely abstain during designated periods, fasts, and then engage fully during limited windows, feasts. This might mean checking social media or email only during 2 scheduled 30-minute windows each day, rather than constantly throughout the day. This approach leverages the psychological principle that complete abstinence is often easier than moderation for habit change. The most successful digital reduction plans incorporate meaningful replacement activities: nature walks, face-to-face conversations, reading physical books, meditation, and creative hobbies all provide alternative sources of engagement that don't deplete attention in the same way digital activities do. Additionally, these activities often deliver more substantial well-being benefits. Research consistently shows that activities involving physical movement, social connection, and natural environments are particularly effective at counteracting the negative effects of excessive screen time. Breaking digital addiction requires understanding how our devices affect our mental landscape, experimenting with personalized detox strategies, and implementing sustainable boundaries that protect our attention and well-being. By mastering the power of pause, creating deliberate spaces between ourselves and our devices, we reclaim the stillness necessary for deep thought, creativity, and genuine human connection. The attention renaissance. When we recognize the cognitive cost of constant connectivity, we begin to value attention as our most precious resource. Unlike time, which flows at a constant rate for everyone, attention can be squandered or cultivated. The average person can focus on demanding cognitive tasks for only about 4 to 5 hours per day. Yet many of us waste this limited resource on low-value digital activities, leaving little for the deep work that advances our most important goals and relationships. Cal Newport, computer science professor and author of Digital Minimalism, describes how technologies like social media are designed to fragment attention. These services, he writes, are engineered to be addictive, robbing time and attention from activities that more directly support your professional and personal goals. This isn't accidental. It's the explicit business model of many digital platforms. The attention economy profits from keeping us engaged, not from enhancing our well-being or productivity. Think of your attention as the soil in which your achievements, relationships, and happiness grow. Digital overstimulation is like repeatedly walking across this soil, compacting it and making it harder for anything meaningful to take root. Strategic stillness, deliberate periods away from digital stimulation, loosens this soil, creating space for new ideas, deeper connections, and creative solutions to emerge. This is why companies like Google and 3M have famously instituted policies allowing employees time away from their regular responsibilities for unstructured thinking. The quality of your attention directly influences the quality of your life. When you're constantly distracted by digital inputs, you experience what psychologists call continuous partial attention, a state where you're never fully present for anything. This fragmented awareness prevents deep engagement with work, conversations, and even leisure activities. By contrast, cultivating periods of undivided attention creates the conditions for flow states, those deeply satisfying experiences of complete absorption in a challenging but manageable task. From reactive to proactive, most digital consumption happens reactively. We respond to notifications, follow algorithmic recommendations, and click on whatever captures our attention momentarily. This reactive stance places the control of our attention in external hands. Shifting to proactive technology use means deciding in advance how, when, and why you'll engage with digital tools, aligning these decisions with your core values and goals. This shift requires examining the role technology plays in your life. Is your smartphone primarily a tool that serves your needs, or has it become something that shapes your behavior to serve its needs? The difference isn't in the technology itself, but in how intentionally you engage with it. Proactive users make technology decisions based on their values rather than convenience or social pressure. They regularly evaluate whether digital tools are enhancing or detracting from what matters most to them. We don't need new technologies. We need new behaviors, argues Tristan Harris, former Google design ethicist and co-founder of the Center for Humane Technology. His point highlights an important truth. The problem isn't technology itself, but our relationship with it. By developing mindful technology habits, we can harness digital tools' benefits while minimizing their costs to our attention and well-being. The path to attention mastery isn't about rejecting technology, but about putting it in its proper place. This means establishing clear boundaries between connected and disconnected time, between consumption and creation, between reaction and reflection. These boundaries aren't limitations, but liberations. They free us from digital dependency and create space for the deeper engagement that leads to fulfillment and achievement. The stillness advantage in practice. Companies that understand the power of stillness are gaining competitive advantages. At LinkedIn, employees participate in investment days, periods where they can step away from regular tasks to explore new ideas or develop skills. These breaks from routine digital engagement often spark innovations that wouldn't emerge during normal workflow. Similarly, Microsoft has found that implementing meeting-free Fridays increases both employee satisfaction and productivity by creating space for uninterrupted deep work. For individuals, the stillness advantage might manifest as improved creativity, better decision-making, or enhanced relationships. One study from the University of Michigan found that people who took daily walks in nature showed a 20% improvement in working memory and attention compared to those who walked in urban environments. Another study from Harvard showed that meditation practices that cultivate stillness physically change brain structures associated with attention, learning, and emotional regulation. What these organizational and individual examples share is recognition that constant digital engagement, even when seemingly productive, eventually yields diminishing returns. The most valuable insights often emerge not from more information, but from better integration of existing information. This integration happens naturally during periods of relative stillness, when our brains can process, connect, and synthesize what we already know. The ultimate stillness advantage comes from alternating between periods of focused engagement and strategic disengagement. This rhythm, like the necessary pauses between musical notes that create melody, allows us to process information more deeply, make unexpected connections, and approach challenges with renewed perspective. By breaking the addiction to digital dopamine, we create space for this natural cognitive rhythm to reemerge. Practical steps toward digital balance. The journey toward digital balance isn't about perfection, but progress. Each small step away from digital dependency is a step toward reclaiming your attention, creativity, and agency. The goal isn't to eliminate technology, it's to put it in its proper place, as a tool that serves your deeper purposes rather than a force that shapes your life according to its algorithms. The addiction to digital dopamine represents one of the most significant barriers to experiencing stillness in our modern world. By now, you've recognized how these constant stimuli fragment attention, short-circuit deep thinking, and ultimately diminish our capacity for the strategic thought that drives both success and sanity. The research is clear. Our minds require respite from the barrage of notifications, updates, and alerts to operate at peak effectiveness. Companies like Google and 3M haven't instituted policies for unstructured thinking time because it's trendy. They've done so because it demonstrably enhances innovation, problem solving, and overall performance. What we've covered in this chapter isn't merely about improving productivity, it's about reclaiming your cognitive autonomy. When you break free from digital dependency, you don't just work better, you think better, feel better, and ultimately live better. The Digital Detox Blueprint, From Addicted to Autonomous. Goal: transform your relationship with technology from compulsive consumption to intentional usage, thereby regaining control of your attention and enhancing your capacity for deep work and creativity. Track every interaction with your devices. Don't judge, just observe and record. Use screen time analytics or apps like Rescue Time to measure exactly where your attention goes. Note which platforms trigger the strongest urges to check and recheck. Review your audit results. Which apps consume most of your time? When do you reach for your phone instinctively? Which notifications cause immediate responses? Be brutally honest about your psychological dependencies. Define what success looks like for your detox. Will you eliminate certain apps entirely? Restrict usage to specific times? Choose a time frame that challenges you without setting yourself up for failure. Start with 24 to 48 hours if you're highly dependent. Modify your environment to reduce temptation. Delete problematic apps. Use site blockers. Place your charger in another room. Or use a timed lockbox for your devices during designated offline periods. Inform key people about your detox intentions. Request understanding when you're slow to respond, and consider finding an accountability partner who shares similar goals. Nature abhors a vacuum. Fill newly available time with analog activities that fulfill similar psychological needs: journaling instead of social media, exercise instead of gaming, or meditation instead of news scrolling. When reintroducing technology, do so intentionally. Install only essential apps, adjust notification settings, and schedule specific times for checking email or social media rather than allowing constant access. Create sustainable rules for digital consumption. Perhaps no phones during meals, no screens an hour before bed, or designated device-free days each month. Document these commitments. Track your progress regularly. Notice how your mood, productivity, and creativity fluctuate in relation to your digital consumption patterns. Refine your approach based on these observations. The science behind stillness reveals something profound. Our most valuable insights rarely emerge during periods of constant stimulation. Instead, they surface in the spaces between, during walks without podcasts, showers without waterproof phone cases, and mornings without immediate email checks. Your ability to disconnect directly correlates with your capacity to connect deeply with your own thoughts. This skill, the power to direct attention at will rather than surrendering it to the loudest notification, may be the most valuable competitive advantage in today's economy. Breaking free from digital dependency isn't about technological abstinence, it's about technological mastery. It's recognizing that these tools should amplify your intentions rather than hijack them. Start small. Be patient with yourself. Celebrate progress. The stillness you cultivate becomes the space where your most valuable thinking happens. Your relationship with technology doesn't change overnight. But with deliberate practice and the blueprint provided, you'll gradually shift from reacting to digital stimuli to responding intentionally, creating the mental space required for the strategic thinking that characterizes truly exceptional performers. The path forward is clear. Build your capacity for stillness, one notification silence at a time. Chapter 4: Embracing Vulnerability and Failure. The myth that's breaking your brain. The reality you've been sold is a lie. The badge of honor you wear for doing it all at once is actually a productivity prison. You've been trapped in the multitasking myth, the false belief that splitting your attention somehow multiplies your output. The research is unequivocal. Switching between tasks can reduce productivity by up to 40%. This isn't just inefficiency, it's cognitive sabotage. In our hyperconnected world, we've confused motion with progress. We respond to emails while on conference calls, draft proposals during meetings, and scroll through notifications while speaking with colleagues. The cruel irony? This frantic juggling act leaves us feeling productive while actually diminishing our capacity to deliver quality work. The constant context switching creates a cognitive tax that drains mental resources and fragments our attention. The path forward isn't working harder or faster, it's working deeper. True productivity emerges from stillness, not chaos. When we allow ourselves to focus completely on one task, we enter a state of flow where our best work happens naturally. This chapter confronts the uncomfortable truth that what feels productive often isn't, and what feels counterintuitive, slowing down to focus on one thing, often yields superior results. The courage to do less. Embracing single tasking requires something unexpected: courage. It takes real bravery to close the extra tabs, silence notifications, and commit fully to the task at hand when everyone around you seems to be juggling responsibilities like circus performers. It requires the willingness to temporarily disappoint others by not being instantly available. It demands that we face our fear of missing out and our addiction to constant stimulation. This courage extends beyond work habits. The principles of stillness and focus connect directly to how we handle setbacks and failure. Learning to pause between stimulus and response creates space for reflection rather than reaction. When we stop the frantic cycle of multitasking, we gain the mental clarity to process failures constructively instead of immediately rushing to the next distraction. Throughout this chapter, we'll explore 3 essential aspects of the stillness advantage. First, we'll examine why accepting and learning from failure is not just helpful, but necessary for meaningful growth. Second, we'll introduce specific practices that transform setbacks into stepping stones through intentional reflection. Finally, we'll address how vulnerability, the willingness to acknowledge limitations and mistakes, becomes a leadership superpower rather than a weakness. The connection between focus and vulnerability might seem tenuous at first glance, but they share a common foundation: the willingness to be present with what is, rather than distracting ourselves with what could be. Multitasking is often a defense mechanism, a way to avoid fully engaging with difficult tasks or uncomfortable realities. When we embrace single tasking, we simultaneously practice the art of being present with challenges rather than evading them. The most successful people aren't those who never fail or never feel vulnerable. They're the ones who've learned to stay present through discomfort, who've developed the capacity to focus deeply on what matters, and who understand that stillness, not frantic activity, is the true competitive advantage in a world that can't stop moving. This chapter will show you how to cultivate that advantage for yourself. The paradox of productive failure. The coffee had gone cold. Mark hadn't touched it in 30 minutes, too busy flicking between spreadsheets, email notifications, and the half-written presentation due tomorrow. The office hummed with the quiet intensity of a Wednesday afternoon. Outside his window, rain tapped against the glass, steady and insistent like his mounting deadlines. This isn't working, he thought, rubbing his eyes. 3 projects, all urgent, none progressing. The more he tried to juggle them, the more his mind fragmented. Each switch between tasks cost him precious minutes of reorientation. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, mirroring the static in his brain. Mark remembered last month's performance review. His boss had praised his ability to handle multiple priorities, while subtly suggesting his output didn't match his potential. The comment had lodged in his chest like a stone. He took a sip of the cold coffee, grimaced, and set it down harder than necessary. A colleague glanced over from the next cubicle. The notification chime pulled his attention back to his email. Another request, another priority. Mark's shoulders tensed as he reached for his phone, then stopped. He recalled an article he'd read about the myth of multitasking. The research had been clear. Attempting to do everything at once meant doing nothing well. The human brain wasn't designed for simultaneous processing. Each context switch degraded performance. He looked at the 3 open projects on his screen, fragments of thought scattered across each. Mark closed 2 of the windows. The relief was immediate, like stepping from a crowded room into silence. He turned off email notifications, set his phone face down, and pulled a notepad from his drawer. The paper felt substantial under his hand. He wrote 3 headings, 1 for each project, and assigned time blocks to each. First things first. The rain continued against the window, but now it sounded less like pressure and more like rhythm. The coffee station stood empty when he went for a refill. Steam rose from the fresh cup, carrying the rich scent that had been absent from his cold one. Mark glanced at the clock, 3:17. He'd work on Project A until 4:30, take a 10-minute break, then switch to Project B until the end of the day. Tomorrow morning would be dedicated to the presentation. The plan wasn't complicated, but it felt like finding solid ground after weeks of sinking. Back at his desk, with one clear task before him, Mark felt his focus sharpen. The words came more easily, ideas connected. Without the constant interruption of divided attention, his mind moved deeper into the problem, finding solutions that had eluded him during hours of fragmented effort. The clicking of his keyboard joined the rain's percussion. What if productivity wasn't about doing more things at once, but about giving the right things our full attention for the right amount of time? The gift of failure. Failure isn't just an outcome, it's a teacher. When we miss the mark, we receive immediate feedback on what doesn't work. This concrete information becomes invaluable, showing us precisely where our approaches fall short. Research in cognitive psychology confirms that failure creates stronger neural connections than success, essentially writing lessons more deeply into our memory. Studies from Stanford University indicate that people who view failures as learning opportunities consistently outperform those who shy away from potential failure experiences. Think of failure as a skilled woodworker's sandpaper. At first contact, it feels rough and uncomfortable, even painful. But with continued application, something remarkable happens. The rough edges smooth out, the imperfections disappear. What emerges is something stronger and more refined than what existed before. Your failures don't wear you down, they polish you up. The business landscape is littered with examples of spectacular failures that preceded extraordinary success. James Dyson created 5,126 failed prototypes before developing his revolutionary vacuum cleaner. Sarah Blakely, founder of Spanx, was rejected by countless manufacturers before finding one willing to produce her product. Thomas Edison famously remarked about his light bulb experiments, "I have not failed. I've just found 10,000 ways that won't work." Each failure provided specific information that guided their next attempt. But accepting failure doesn't come naturally to most of us. Our educational systems and workplace cultures typically reward perfection and penalize mistakes. This creates a paradox. We need failure to improve, yet we're conditioned to avoid it at all costs. The multitasking trap exemplifies this perfectly. We juggle multiple tasks, believing we're being productive, when research clearly shows this approach decreases our effectiveness by up to 40%. Our fear of falling behind leads us to work in ways that guarantee we will fall behind. Practicing single tasking requires the courage to prioritize and the willingness to let some things go undone temporarily. It means embracing the potential short-term failure of not completing everything at once. But this deliberate choice leads to higher quality work, deeper focus, and ultimately greater overall productivity. The willingness to accept the small failure of doing less leads to the greater success of doing better. Consider how elite athletes train. They deliberately practice at the edge of their abilities, the zone where failure is not just possible, but likely. They understand that comfort prevents growth. This principle applies equally to mental work. When you push against your cognitive limits by fully engaging with one challenging task instead of juggling several, your capacity expands through temporary struggles. Personal growth requires this same willingness to venture into uncomfortable territory. By single tasking on difficult projects, you create space for productive struggle, the kind that strengthens your capabilities. Each focused attempt, even when it falls short, builds neural pathways that make success more likely in subsequent efforts. The temporary discomfort of concentrated effort yields permanent improvements in skill and understanding. Our productivity obsession often drives us to multitask, but this approach virtually guarantees mediocrity across all our efforts. When we scatter our attention, we deny ourselves the opportunity to receive clear feedback on any single endeavor. Multitasking doesn't just diminish our performance, it robs us of the specific, actionable lessons that focused failure provides. Embracing failure is not about celebrating disappointment, but about recognizing that our greatest growth occurs precisely when we stop dividing our attention and focus fully on challenges that might temporarily defeat us. Turning setbacks into stepping stones. Reflection transforms raw experience into wisdom. Without deliberate reflection, even powerful failures lose much of their teaching potential. The practice of reflection requires pausing, creating intentional space between experiences, and moving forward. Research from Harvard Business School found that employees who spent 15 minutes reflecting at the end of their day performed 23% better after 10 days than those who didn't. This improvement occurred not because reflection is magical, but because it converts tacit knowledge into explicit understanding. What does effective reflection look like in practice? Begin by setting aside dedicated time, whether daily, weekly, or after significant projects, to review what happened and why. Ask yourself specific questions. What worked well? What didn't work as expected? What would I do differently next time? Record these reflections somewhere accessible, creating a personal knowledge base you can revisit. The act of articulating your thoughts transforms fuzzy impressions into clear insights. Think of reflection as similar to developing photographs in a darkroom. The experiences are captured on film, but without the chemical process of development, they remain invisible, potential, rather than useful images. Reflection is your developmental process, bringing clarity and permanence to lessons that would otherwise fade. Prioritization stands as the essential companion to reflection. Once you've identified insights from past setbacks, you must decide which lessons deserve your focused attention. Not all failures yield equally valuable teachings. Some point to simple mistakes, while others reveal fundamental misalignments in your approach. The discipline of single tasking applies here too. Choose the most significant learning and implement it fully before moving to the next. The practice of deliberate single tasking creates natural reflection points throughout your day. When you complete one focused task before beginning another, you create a boundary, a pause that allows for quick assessment. Did this approach work? What adjustments would improve the result next time? These micro-reflections compound over time, gradually refining your methods without requiring extensive formal review sessions. Feedback accelerates growth exponentially. While self-reflection is powerful, external perspectives often reveal blind spots we cannot see ourselves. Actively seek input from trusted colleagues, mentors, or friends about your work and approaches. The key lies in asking specific questions rather than fishing for compliments. What's one thing I could improve about my presentation style yields more actionable insights than how did I do? One powerful framework for structuring reflection comes from the U.S. Army's After Action Review process. It asks four simple questions. What was supposed to happen? What actually happened? Why was there a difference? What can we learn from this? This straightforward approach cuts through emotion and excuses, focusing attention on objective assessment and forward-looking improvements. Applied to individual work, it transforms setbacks from disappointments into data. Creating tangible reminders of lessons learned sustains their impact. Consider maintaining a failure resume alongside your traditional resume, documenting significant setbacks and what they taught you. Review this document periodically to reinforce hard-won wisdom. Some professionals keep a decision journal, recording not just outcomes, but their thinking process at the time of important choices. Reviewing these entries later reveals patterns in your reasoning that might otherwise remain invisible. The greatest barrier to learning from setbacks isn't the failure itself, but our emotional response to it. Our brains naturally defend against threats to our self-image, often through rationalization or blame shifting. Acknowledge these tendencies by creating a pre-mortem before important projects. Imagine the effort has failed completely, then work backward to identify potential causes. This practice neutralizes defensive reactions by treating potential failures as hypothetical scenarios rather than personal shortcomings. Physical environments powerfully influence our mental states. Create dedicated spaces for reflection that signal to your brain it's time to think deeply rather than react quickly. This might be a specific chair, a walking route, or simply a notebook you use exclusively for reflection. The consistency of the setting helps transition your mind from doing mode to learning mode, making reflection a habit rather than an afterthought. What if your greatest competitive advantage isn't your ability to avoid failure, but your capacity to extract more learning from each setback than others around you? The strength in vulnerability. Vulnerability in professional settings remains deeply misunderstood. Most perceive it as weakness, an unnecessary exposure of flaws that undermines credibility. Research tells a different story. Studies by Dr. Brené Brown demonstrate that vulnerability actually forms the foundation of innovation, creativity, and meaningful connection. When leaders acknowledge uncertainty or admit mistakes, they don't lose respect, they gain trust. This counterintuitive finding explains why the most effective teams often have leaders who model appropriate vulnerability. The traditional workplace rewards the appearance of perfection, constant capability, unwavering confidence, and seamless execution. This creates a culture of pretense where people expend enormous energy hiding struggles rather than addressing them. Consider how multitasking serves this illusion perfectly. By juggling multiple responsibilities simultaneously, we can appear busy and productive even when we're accomplishing little of substance. The vulnerability of saying, "I need to focus on just this one thing right now," feels risky precisely because it's honest about our cognitive limitations. Vulnerability resembles a counterintuitive law of physics, where what seems like your point of weakness becomes your greatest strength. Like a suspension bridge that flexes slightly in strong winds, rather than standing rigid until it breaks, people who acknowledge limitations demonstrate resilience rather than fragility. Those who never admit struggles are like structures with hidden stress fractures, appearing solid while growing increasingly unstable. Creating psychological safety transforms team dynamics. Google's extensive Project Aristotle research identified psychological safety, the belief that one won't be punished for making mistakes or speaking up, as the single most important factor in high-performing teams. Leaders establish this safety by modeling vulnerability first, demonstrating that honest questions and admissions of uncertainty are valued contributions rather than professional liabilities. When someone acknowledges, "I'm struggling with this problem," they create space for collective problem solving. Practical steps toward cultivating vulnerability begin with language choices. Replace "I should know this" with "I'm still learning about this." Instead of "I can handle everything," try "I need to focus on this priority right now." These simple shifts acknowledge human limitations without apologizing for them. They signal confidence in your development process rather than pretending development isn't necessary. Most importantly, they give others permission to be equally honest about their own challenges. Vulnerability builds deeper connections because it appeals to a fundamental human truth. We trust those who trust us. When you share appropriate challenges, you implicitly demonstrate trust in the other person's response. This invitation to authentic interaction typically elicits reciprocal openness, creating relationships based on reality rather than performance. These genuine connections become invaluable resources during inevitable difficulties, providing support when perfect self-sufficiency proves impossible. The courage to single task represents a profound form of professional vulnerability. When you decline additional responsibilities to focus on current priorities, you risk judgment. Others might label you as unambitious or incapable. Yet this boundary setting actually demonstrates exceptional self-awareness and commitment to quality. It requires the vulnerability to acknowledge that your cognitive resources are finite and valuable, too valuable to waste on the inefficiency of constant task switching. Vulnerability becomes sustainable when organizations recognize and reward it appropriately. Leaders must actively appreciate honest assessments rather than just demanding them. When someone admits they need more time to complete quality work instead of multitasking, that courage deserves recognition. When teams acknowledge uncertainty in planning rather than making unrealistic commitments, that honesty should be celebrated. Consistent positive reinforcement transforms vulnerability from an individual risk into a collective strength. The themes of embracing failure, implementing reflective practices, and cultivating vulnerability converge around a central truth. Sustainable success requires the courage to acknowledge reality. Whether that reality is the cognitive impossibility of effective multitasking, the necessity of learning through setbacks, or the power of authentic professional relationships, progress begins with honest assessment rather than wishful thinking. These practices don't just build individual resilience. They create environments where everyone can bring their full capabilities to bear on meaningful challenges. The pause that propels. When failure strikes, your first instinct might be to immediately jump into fixing mode. This reactive approach feels productive but often misses crucial learning opportunities. Instead, intentional pausing after setbacks creates space for the emotional processing necessary before rational analysis becomes possible. Neuroscience confirms this sequence. The limbic system, emotional brain, activates first during failure, and attempting to bypass this response with immediate logical thinking rarely succeeds. Effective pausing doesn't mean inaction. It means directed reflection. Set a specific time frame appropriate to the scale of the setback, perhaps an hour for a minor project issue, a day for a significant professional challenge, or longer for major life transitions. During this period, focus explicitly on understanding what happened rather than solving the problem. Document observations without judgment, capturing details that might otherwise be lost to memory's natural distortions. Consider your relationship with failure as you would tend a garden. Constant activity without pause, frantically planting, watering, weeding without ever stepping back to observe patterns, leads to exhaustion with minimal results. The wise gardener regularly pauses, observes the overall system, notices which approaches thrive and which struggle, then makes informed adjustments. These deliberate pauses don't slow progress. They accelerate it by preventing repeated, ineffective efforts. Our action-addicted culture equates pausing with laziness, says leadership expert Kevin Cashman. But strategic pauses are the foundation of clarity and wisdom. This insight directly challenges our multitasking tendencies. We frantically switch between activities, believing motion equals progress, when often the opposite is true. The courage to stop, assess, and redirect often represents the most productive action possible. The quality of your questions determines the value of your reflective pauses. Rather than asking, "Why did this happen to me?" which encourages victimhood, try, "What can I learn from this experience?" Or, "How might this setback serve my long-term goals?" These forward-looking inquiries transform failures from endings into beginnings, from final judgments into initial data points. They acknowledge reality while maintaining agency over your response. Human flourishing requires both action and reflection, progress and pause. To implement this balance, consider adopting a learning sprint approach. Dedicated periods of focused effort, single tasking, followed by structured reflection. This rhythm mimics elite athletic training, where intense exertion alternates with recovery. The reflection period isn't wasted time, it's when your understanding consolidates and deepens, preparing you for more effective future action. What might become possible if you treated pauses not as interruptions to your productivity, but as essential components of your success? Creating a culture of courageous vulnerability. Organizational cultures reveal their true values through what gets rewarded rather than what gets proclaimed. In many workplaces, the stated value of innovation clashes with an unstated penalty for failed experiments. This contradiction creates environments where people perform innovation theater, safe, incremental changes dressed up as bold initiatives, rather than pursuing genuinely novel approaches. True innovation requires psychological safety, the shared belief that interpersonal risk-taking won't result in punishment or humiliation. Leaders establish vulnerability norms through consistent modeling. When a senior team member acknowledges a mistake or uncertainty, they demonstrate that such honesty is acceptable and valued. Microsoft CEO Satya Nadella exemplifies this approach, openly discussing the company's failed initiatives and his personal learning curve. This transparency hasn't weakened his leadership. It has strengthened the organization's innovative capacity by reducing fear of failure throughout the company. Picture vulnerability as the foundation of a building rather than a decorative feature. Without this solid base, even the most impressive-looking structures become unstable. Teams that appear highly functional but lack psychological safety often collapse under pressure, with members retreating into self-protection rather than collaborative problem-solving. The superficial efficiency of everyone multitasking on their individual priorities gives way to disconnection precisely when integration matters most. Practical methods for building vulnerability-positive environments include structured sharing practices. Some teams begin meetings with a brief win-learn round, where each person shares a recent success and a current challenge or learning edge. This ritual normalizes both achievement and struggle as natural parts of meaningful work. Others implement failure forums, where team members analyze unsuccessful initiatives with the explicit goal of extracting lessons rather than assigning blame. Language shapes reality in organizational settings. Leaders should examine their verbal and written communications for subtle messages about vulnerability. Phrases like, "We don't make mistakes here," or "Failure is not an option," create fear-based cultures regardless of what the mission statement claims. Replace these with, "We learn from every attempt," or "Thoughtful risk-taking is essential to our success." These alternatives acknowledge reality. Mistakes will happen, while focusing attention on the response rather than the event itself. Feedback structures powerfully influence vulnerability levels. Traditional performance reviews that emphasize judgment over development naturally discourage openness about challenges. Consider implementing more frequent, development-focused conversations that explicitly separate growth discussions from evaluation processes. Questions like, "What would help you learn faster?" or "Where do you feel you're currently stretched?" invite authentic sharing that drives improvement. The physical environment also impacts vulnerability expression. Open office plans, supposedly designed to increase collaboration, often achieve the opposite by creating constant visibility that encourages performance over authenticity. Create dedicated spaces for different types of work, focused individual effort, collaborative problem solving, and reflective thinking. This variety acknowledges the full spectrum of professional needs, rather than pretending continuous interaction is always beneficial. Recognition systems should explicitly value learning-oriented behaviors alongside outcome achievements. When someone acknowledges a mistake early, preventing larger consequences, that courage deserves public appreciation. When a team transparently documents what didn't work in an experiment, that contribution builds organizational wisdom. By celebrating these vulnerability-based actions, leaders reinforce that psychological safety isn't just permitted, it's essential to collective success. The integration of failure acceptance, reflective practices, and vulnerability cultivation creates environments where people can bring their whole selves to work. This wholeness, The ability to acknowledge both strengths and limitations, certainties and questions, successes and setbacks, unlocks cognitive capacity previously consumed by impression management. When we stop pretending we can effectively multitask, we create space for the focused attention, honest assessment, and authentic collaboration that drives sustainable achievement. The journey through vulnerability and failure isn't simply a path to personal growth. It's the fundamental route to authentic success. By now, you understand that the most accomplished individuals aren't those who avoid failure, but those who transform it into their greatest teacher. The stillness required to honestly assess our shortcomings creates the space where true insight emerges. When we pause to reflect on setbacks rather than rushing to the next task, we build the resilience necessary for sustainable achievement. This deliberate reflection breaks the multitasking myth that keeps us perpetually busy, yet surprisingly unproductive. Remember, focusing deeply on understanding one failure teaches more than skimming through dozens of successes. The environments we create, both internally and externally, determine whether vulnerability becomes our strength or our weakness. By cultivating spaces where honest assessment is valued over perfect performance, we unlock not only our potential, but that of those around us. The Failure Recovery Protocol. The process of transforming failures into foundations for success requires more than good intentions. It demands a structured approach. This protocol provides the framework needed to extract maximum value from your setbacks while building your vulnerability muscle. Step 1. Conduct a failure inventory, 30 to 45 minutes. Set aside uninterrupted time with a notebook or digital document. List significant failures from your personal and professional life. For each, note what happened, your emotional response, and the immediate aftermath. Don't rush this process. Allow yourself to feel the weight of these experiences without judgment. Step 2. Extract the learning, 45 to 60 minutes. Review your inventory and identify the lessons embedded in each experience. What skills were you missing? What assumptions proved incorrect? What would you do differently with today's knowledge? These insights form the foundation of your growth. Step 3. Deep dive analysis, 60 minutes. Select the failure that still triggers strong emotions. Break it down methodically. What specific actions or decisions contributed to the outcome? How did you respond in the moment? What patterns do you notice in your reaction? Document alternative approaches you might take if faced with similar circumstances today. Step 4. Practice controlled vulnerability, ongoing. Share your analysis with someone you trust, a mentor, friend, or colleague. Choose a comfortable setting where you won't be rushed. Focus not just on the event itself, but on your emotional journey through it. Notice how articulating these experiences diminishes their power over you. Step 5. Establish reflection rituals, weekly, 20 minutes. Create a recurring calendar appointment for reflection. Use this time to journal about recent challenges, partial successes, and outright failures. Track patterns in your responses and celebrate progress in how you handle setbacks. This practice builds the stillness muscle that counters the multitasking mindset. Step 6. Seek vulnerability-positive environments. Monthly. Identify and participate in communities that value authentic sharing. This might be a professional mastermind, workshop, or support group. These environments normalize the experience of failure and provide diverse perspectives on recovery strategies. Step 7. Celebrate vulnerability victories, ongoing. Acknowledge moments when you chose honesty over image management. These small acts of courage, admitting uncertainty, asking for help, sharing struggles, build the foundation for greater resilience and authentic connection. The stillness advantage emerges when we stop running from our failures and instead stand firmly in their presence, extracting their wisdom. By following this protocol, you transform vulnerability from a perceived weakness into your competitive edge, the ability to learn faster, connect more deeply, and innovate more boldly than those trapped in the exhausting performance of perfection. As you move forward, remember that embracing failure isn't about lowering standards, it's about raising your capacity for growth. The pause between failure and response contains all the power you need to transform setbacks into stepping stones. In that stillness, you'll find not just recovery, but reinvention. Chapter 5. The Transformative Power of Pausing. The decision fatigue epidemic. Nobody's talking about. The human brain makes approximately 35,000 decisions every day. Each choice, from what to eat for breakfast to which strategy will save your company millions, draws from the same finite well of mental energy. When this well runs dry, as it inevitably does without proper rest, your ability to think creatively, solve problems effectively, and make sound judgments deteriorates rapidly. This isn't weakness, it's neuroscience. Decision fatigue silently erodes your cognitive performance. Yet, in our hyper-connected, always-on culture, we rarely acknowledge this limitation, much less develop strategies to work with it rather than against it. The relentless pace of modern life has normalized a dangerous cognitive marathon. We pride ourselves on multitasking, back-to-back meetings, and instant responsiveness while overlooking the toll this takes on our mental bandwidth. Research consistently shows that judges deliver harsher sentences later in the day, doctors prescribe more unnecessary antibiotics as their shifts wear on, and executives make increasingly poor financial decisions as board meetings drag into evening hours. These aren't coincidences, they're predictable consequences of depleted mental resources. What makes this particularly insidious is how decision fatigue manifests. You don't suddenly lose consciousness or feel a dramatic crash. Instead, your brain begins taking shortcuts. You become more impulsive, more likely to maintain the status quo regardless of merit, or more susceptible to letting others decide for you. The quality of your thinking degrades so gradually, you rarely notice it happening. Even worse, the fatigue accumulates precisely when you need your sharpest thinking, during complex projects, high-stakes negotiations, or critical personal crossroads. Paradoxically, the antidote to this cognitive drain isn't working harder or pushing through. It's strategically doing nothing. The intentional pause, a deliberate cessation of activity, acts as a cognitive reset button. When you temporarily step away from decision-making, your brain transitions from its focused, energy-intensive task mode to its diffuse, restorative default mode. This shift isn't merely a timeout. It's an active recalibration that restores your mental resources and often leads to unexpected insights that never would have emerged during continuous work. Throughout this chapter, we'll examine specific moments when pausing delivers outsized returns on your mental investment. You'll learn to identify critical junctures where even a brief pause can prevent costly mistakes or reveal innovative solutions. These aren't arbitrary breaks, but strategically timed cognitive resets that align with your brain's natural rhythms and requirements. The goal isn't to work less, but to work better by honoring the biological reality of how your mind functions at its best. We'll also explore practical techniques for integrating these pauses into even the most demanding schedules. From micro pauses that take seconds but interrupt detrimental mental patterns, to more substantial resets that facilitate deeper insights, you'll develop a toolkit for mental renewal that suits your specific challenges. The focus remains practical and results-oriented. These aren't indulgent distractions, but essential practices that enhance performance across every domain that matters to you. Finally, we'll practice applying these pause techniques to 3 areas where their impact is most transformative: creative problem-solving, decision-making, and interpersonal communication. You'll discover how properly timed stillness can break through creative blocks, expose cognitive biases affecting your choices, and dramatically improve how you connect with others. These aren't theoretical benefits. They're immediate, practical advantages available to anyone willing to embrace the counterintuitive power of periodically doing nothing. The resistance you might feel toward implementing these pauses isn't accidental. Our culture celebrates constant action and immediate responsiveness, treating stillness as laziness or indulgence. But this chapter invites you to question that assumption. What if strategic inaction is actually the missing ingredient in your pursuit of exceptional results? What if the moments you aren't actively producing could ultimately determine the quality of everything you produce? The evidence suggests exactly that, and the practices that follow will show you how to harness this hidden advantage that's been available to you all along. When the mind needs space to create. John sat at his desk, staring at the blank canvas. The afternoon sun streamed through the window, casting long shadows across his studio apartment. The clock ticked. His deadline loomed. Nothing came. He closed his eyes and rubbed his temples. The morning had been a parade of small decisions. What to wear, which emails to answer first, whether to accept that new project, what to eat for lunch. Each choice had seemed trivial in isolation, but now, faced with the need for genuine creativity, his mind felt like an engine running on fumes. Can't force it, he thought, rising from his chair. The wooden floor creaked beneath his feet as he moved to the window. Outside, the city hummed with life. People walking, talking, existing without any awareness of his creative blockage. He opened the window. The spring air rushed in, carrying with it the scent of blooming trees and distant rain. He breathed deeply, feeling something loosen in his chest. John had been here before. 3 years ago, working on the Henderson campaign, he'd hit a similar wall. Back then, he'd pushed through, working 18-hour days until the ideas became a blur of mediocrity. The client had been satisfied, but not impressed. He remembered his old mentor, Davis, watching him burn out. The mind isn't a machine, Davis had told him. It needs fallow periods, stillness. The greatest ideas come when you stop demanding them to appear. He stepped away from his work table, resisting the urge to check his phone. Every notification represented another decision: respond now or later, important or not. Instead, he walked to the small kitchen area and filled a glass with water. The coolness against his throat centered him. He looked at the clock again. Still time. He decided to surrender to the moment rather than fight it. Outside, he walked without destination. The neighborhood park welcomed him with open space and scattered people enjoying the afternoon. A child laughed as she chased a butterfly. An old man read a newspaper on a bench. John found an empty patch of grass and sat down, feeling the earth support his weight. He closed his eyes again, this time not from frustration, but from choice. His thoughts drifted like clouds, first about the project, then about lunch, then about nothing at all. The sun warmed his face. Time stretched and contracted around him. He didn't know how long he sat there, but when he opened his eyes, something had changed. Not just in his surroundings, the shadows had lengthened further, but within himself. The mental fatigue had lifted. Walking back to his apartment, ideas began to flow. Not in a torrent, but in a steady stream. Each step seemed to bring new clarity. By the time he reached his door, he knew exactly what the canvas needed. His hand moved to his pocket for his keys, finding instead a small stone he must have picked up in the park without realizing it. He smiled at this small gift from his period of stillness. Back at his desk, John felt the difference immediately. His decisions came easily now, each brushstroke following the last with natural purpose. The creative block that had seemed insurmountable just an hour ago now appeared as nothing more than a signal, his mind's way of demanding the rest it required to function at its best. What might we accomplish if we recognize decision fatigue not as weakness, but as wisdom, our minds signaling for the stillness they need to create something truly remarkable? Recognizing decision junctions. In today's hyper-connected world, decisions bombard us from every direction. From the moment we wake up to check our phones, we're already making choices that affect our day. Should I respond to this email now or later? Do I have time for breakfast? What should I wear? By 9 a.m., most of us have already made dozens of decisions, many without conscious thought. Think of your mind like a car engine. Run it constantly at high speeds without brakes, and eventually it overheats. When was the last time you felt mentally exhausted after a day of back-to-back meetings or tough choices? That mental fatigue isn't just tiredness, it's decision fatigue, a documented psychological phenomenon where the quality of our decisions deteriorates after making many consecutive choices. Research from Columbia University found that judges were significantly more likely to grant parole to prisoners after their food breaks than before them. As the hours since their last break increased, the likelihood of a favorable ruling dropped dramatically, from about 65% to nearly zero. These weren't lazy or incompetent judges. They were experiencing decision fatigue. Their mental resources were depleted, leading them to default to the safest choice, denying parole. Your life is filled with similar decision points that would benefit from a strategic pause. Consider the high-stakes conversation with your boss about a promotion. Many people enter these discussions unprepared, driven by anxiety or impatience. A brief pause beforehand, Even just 5 minutes of quiet reflection can help organize thoughts, manage emotions, and formulate clearer arguments. The same applies to major purchases, career changes, or conversations about your relationship's future. The most critical decisions rarely require immediate answers. We create artificial urgency, believing faster responses demonstrate competence or decisiveness. In reality, the opposite is often true. Warren Buffett, one of history's most successful investors, is known for his methodical decision-making process that prioritizes careful thinking over quick reactions. "I insist on a lot of time being spent, almost every day, to just sit and think," he once remarked. This deliberate pause has contributed to his extraordinary success over decades. Pauses become particularly valuable during emotionally charged situations. When you feel anger rising during an argument, your prefrontal cortex, responsible for rational thinking, becomes less active while your amygdala, the brain's emotional center, dominates. A strategic pause as simple as counting to 10 or excusing yourself briefly can prevent words you'll later regret. The most powerful responses often come after a moment of reflection, not from immediate reaction. Technological interruptions represent another area where pausing could transform your effectiveness. Each notification triggers a decision: respond now or later. Research shows that even brief interruptions can significantly impact productivity. A University of California study found that it takes an average of 23 minutes to fully refocus after a distraction. By pausing to establish boundaries around technology, perhaps checking emails at designated times instead of constantly, you protect your mental resources for more important decisions. Financial decisions particularly benefit from the power of pause. Retailers understand the psychology of impulse purchasing and design experiences to minimize thoughtful consideration. The limited time offer creates artificial scarcity and pressures quick decisions. Implementing a personal 24-hour rule for purchases above a certain threshold allows your rational mind to evaluate whether you truly need the item, often saving both money and later regret. In team environments, notice how meetings often prioritize quick consensus over thoughtful deliberation. When someone presents an idea, observe the common pattern: immediate criticism or immediate acceptance, both reactions occurring before full understanding. A leader who creates intentional space for reflection. Let's take 2 minutes to consider this individually before discussing. Often generates more innovative solutions and greater buy-in from team members. The most valuable pauses in decision-making come not from avoiding choices, but from creating intentional space between stimulus and response, allowing your full intelligence to engage rather than defaulting to reactive patterns. Creating your pause protocol. Developing a pause practice doesn't require meditation retreats or hours of daily contemplation. Instead, it means integrating small, strategic breaks into your existing routine. These micro-pauses serve as reset buttons for your mind, preventing decision fatigue before it takes hold. Start by identifying natural transition points in your day. The moments between activities, after finishing a meeting and before starting a new task, or when moving from work to home life, offer perfect opportunities for brief pauses. Even 30 seconds of conscious breathing can reset your mental state. Place visual reminders at these transition points, perhaps a small symbol on your desk or a specific wallpaper on your phone lock screen. What makes these pauses effective isn't their length, but their quality. A truly restorative pause requires disengaging from inputs. This means putting down your phone, stepping away from screens, and allowing your mind to briefly wander without direction. Neuroscience research shows that these moments of diffuse thinking are when our brains often make unexpected connections, leading to creative insights that elude us during focused work. Many high performers schedule deliberate pauses throughout their day. Former CEO of LinkedIn, Jeff Weiner, blocked 90 to 120 minutes of buffer time on his calendar daily, not for meetings or tasks, but for thinking and reflection. This practice, he claims, was essential to his effectiveness as a leader. You might start with something more modest: 5 minutes between meetings or a brief walk at lunchtime without your phone. The environment you choose for your pauses significantly impacts their effectiveness. Open spaces with natural elements, parks, gardens, or even a window view of trees, have been shown to accelerate mental restoration. A 2015 Stanford study found that walking, particularly in natural settings, increased creative thinking by an average of 60% compared to sitting indoors. When weather or circumstances prevent outdoor breaks, even gazing at nature photographs can provide some of these benefits. Consider developing a personal pause protocol for high-stakes decisions. This might include specific questions you ask yourself. What's the real problem I'm trying to solve? What information am I missing? What would I advise someone else in this situation? Having a structured approach prevents your pause from becoming just another form of rumination or worry. Technology can be both enemy and ally in creating effective pauses. While constant connectivity erodes our ability to be present, strategically used apps can help establish new habits. Consider tools that block distractions for set periods or remind you to take breaks. The Pomodoro technique, working in focused 25-minute intervals followed by 5-minute breaks, has helped many people integrate regular pauses into their workflow. Physical movement transforms the quality of your pauses. When you feel mentally stuck, changing your physical state often shifts your perspective. Simple stretches, a brief walk, or even standing instead of sitting can increase blood flow to the brain and reduce stress hormones. This movement needn't be strenuous. Gentle activity often produces better results than intense exercise when the goal is mental clarity. Social pauses, brief, meaningful connections with others, offer another powerful reset mechanism. A genuine conversation, even for just a few minutes, activates different neural pathways than solitary work. These interactions provide perspective and often remind us of what truly matters beyond our immediate concerns. Notice how problems that seemed overwhelming often diminish after sharing them with a trusted colleague or friend. Think of your attention like water in a landscape. Without intentional channels, it simply follows the path of least resistance, usually toward whatever is loudest, brightest, or most urgent. Creating pauses is like building small dams in this landscape, allowing you to direct your mental resources toward what truly matters, rather than what merely demands attention. How might your decisions, relationships, and creative output transform if you treated pauses not as luxuries, but as essential ingredients for peak performance? Applying the pause principle, integrating pauses into your daily routine, creates space for creativity to flourish. When the mind constantly races from one task to the next, it operates primarily in a focused mode that excels at logical thinking but struggles with novel connections. The pause provides transition time for the brain to shift into diffuse mode, where seemingly unrelated ideas merge to form innovative solutions. Consider the story of Archimedes and his famous Eureka moment. The solution to measuring the volume of an irregularly shaped crown didn't come while he was actively working on the problem, but rather during a bath, a pause from his concentrated efforts. This pattern repeats throughout history, from Newton's apple to Einstein's thought experiments. Major breakthroughs often emerge not during focused work, but in the spaces between. Relationship conflicts present another powerful application for the pause principle. When tensions rise, our instinctive responses typically make situations worse, not better. The pause creates crucial distance between trigger and response. Try this. The next time you feel anger rising during a conversation, excuse yourself briefly. I need a moment to collect my thoughts. And take 3 deep breaths before responding. This small gap often prevents escalation and allows for more constructive engagement. The quality of your pauses matters more than their quantity. A 5-minute break spent scrolling social media does little to restore mental resources, while the same time spent in genuine rest, perhaps gazing out a window or simply breathing deeply, can significantly refresh your mind. Experiment with different types of pauses to discover what works best for your particular thinking style and challenges. The Decision-Making Pause Framework. The Decision-Making Pause Framework offers a structured approach to incorporating strategic breaks into your decision-making process. This 3-phase system, pause, process, and proceed, transforms how you approach choices, especially during complex or high-stakes situations. Phase 1, pause. The first phase, pause, involves deliberately stepping back from an immediate decision when you recognize the signs of mental fatigue or emotional reactivity. This pause might be as brief as a few deep breaths before responding to a challenging email, or as extended as a sleep on it approach for major life choices. Effective pausing requires recognizing your personal threshold indicators, the signals that your decision making faculty needs refreshment. These might include feeling unusually irritable, finding yourself unable to prioritize competing demands, or noticing that you're defaulting to the easiest option rather than the best one. The pause itself should create mental space free from the immediate pressure of the decision. Depending on the significance of the choice, this might involve physically changing your environment, engaging in a completely different activity, or simply closing your eyes and taking 10 conscious breaths. Research from the University of Pennsylvania has shown that even brief pauses can significantly improve decision quality by activating regions of the prefrontal cortex associated with higher order thinking. The key is interrupting the automatic response pattern and creating space for deliberation. Phase 2. Process. During the process phase, you engage with the decision from multiple perspectives. Rather than simply thinking harder about the problem, processing involves structured reflection techniques that access different cognitive modes. One effective processing technique is the multiple selves approach. Ask yourself how you would view this decision from different temporal perspectives. What would your future self 1 year from now advise? What would your past self, who doesn't know your current constraints, suggest? This temporal distancing often reveals values and priorities obscured by immediate pressures. Another processing method involves written reflection. The act of writing engages different neural pathways than thinking alone. Try capturing your thoughts in a stream of consciousness journal entry, then reading it back as if someone else wrote it. This simple practice creates psychological distance that enhances objectivity. The processing phase benefits from alternating between focused and diffuse thinking modes. After concentrated analysis of the facts, allow time for unconscious processing through activities that occupy your conscious mind while allowing background processing, activities like walking, showering, or engaging in routine tasks that don't require full attention. For complex decisions involving multiple factors, the processing phase may include more structured approaches, such as creating a decision matrix or consulting trusted advisors who can offer perspectives you might miss. The goal isn't to outsource your decision, but to enrich your understanding of its dimensions. Phase 3. Proceed. The proceed phase transitions from reflection to action with intentionality. After pausing and processing, you move forward with greater clarity about both your decision and your reasoning process. Proceeding effectively means committing to your choice while remaining open to new information. The pause framework doesn't guarantee perfect decisions, but it creates space for more aligned choices and reduces decision regret. When you've thoroughly processed a decision, you can proceed with confidence even when uncertainty remains. An important aspect of proceeding is documenting your decision rationale. Briefly noting why you made a particular choice and what factors you considered serves two purposes. It creates accountability to your future self and provides valuable data for refining your decision process over time. The proceed phase includes implementing support structures for your decision. These might involve scheduling check-in points to evaluate outcomes, identifying potential obstacles in advance, or enlisting accountability partners who understand and support your choice. The framework's power comes from its flexibility. You can scale it from momentary pauses for small decisions to extended reflection periods for life-changing choices. Over time, this approach builds decisional muscles that make the entire process more efficient without sacrificing quality. By intentionally creating space between stimulus and response through strategic pauses, you transform not only individual decisions, but your entire relationship with the decision-making process, allowing creativity to flourish, relationships to deepen, and wisdom to guide your choices across all dimensions of life. Pause your way to power. The simple act of pausing transforms everything it touches. When we create deliberate space between stimulus and response, we unlock doors to better decisions, deeper connections, and unexpected creative breakthroughs. Throughout this chapter, we've explored the hidden costs of perpetual motion. Decision fatigue silently erodes our cognitive abilities when we push through without rest. Each judgment we make, from what to eat for breakfast to critical business choices, draws from the same limited mental reservoir. Without strategic pauses to replenish this resource, our decision quality deteriorates while we remain unaware of the decline. The techniques we've examined aren't luxuries, they're necessities for peak performance. The 5-minute breathing reset between meetings, the technology-free lunch break, the deliberate pause before responding to a challenging email, these practices don't slow progress, they accelerate it by clearing mental pathways. These intentional gaps in activity sharpen our thinking rather than interrupt it. What makes pausing truly transformative is its ripple effect across all dimensions of life. A moment of stillness before responding to your child's misbehavior can preserve a relationship. A quiet walk before tackling a complex problem can reveal solutions invisible to an overtaxed mind. The practice of pausing becomes a master key that unlocks improvements everywhere. Remember that pausing isn't passive, it's intensely active on a neural level. During these apparent down moments, your brain connects disparate ideas, processes emotional data, and integrates new information. This background processing often delivers insights that focused effort cannot produce. Your challenge now is twofold. First, to recognize the moments when pausing would serve you best, and second, to override the cultural programming that equates constant action with productivity. The resistance you'll feel toward pausing is precisely why it's so valuable. Few develop this discipline, giving those who do a remarkable advantage. Start small. Tomorrow, implement just one intentional pause in your day. Notice what changes, then build from there. The stillness advantage compounds over time, transforming not just what you accomplish, but who you become in the process. The power to pause is always available to you. It costs nothing, requires no special equipment, and can be practiced anywhere. Yet, its impact on your decision-making, creativity, and relationships may be the competitive edge you've been seeking all along. Chapter 6: Harnessing Silence to Hear Life's Whispers. The deafening cost of always being on. Your phone buzzes, your inbox pings. The world never stops demanding your attention, and it's killing your clarity. We've been conditioned to glorify perpetual productivity, to wear exhaustion as a badge of honor. But beneath the surface of this relentless pace lies an uncomfortable truth. Humans weren't designed to operate like machines. The constant digital stimulation and endless tasks are drowning out the very signals that could guide us toward greater fulfillment and genuine productivity. In our hyper-connected reality, true silence has become nearly extinct. This scarcity comes at a steep price. Burnout rates are climbing to unprecedented levels, with 76% of professionals reporting symptoms of exhaustion and diminished performance. What the hustle culture celebrates as dedication is actually a direct path to diminished creativity, compromised decision-making, and ultimately, collapse. The most alarming aspect isn't that we're burning out, but that we've normalized this state as the cost of success. The body and mind communicate through subtle signals that can only be detected when we create space for stillness. Like trying to hear a whisper in a crowded room, our intuition's guidance gets lost in the noise of constant stimulation. Practices like yoga, meditation, and deliberate tech-free intervals aren't luxury indulgences. They're essential maintenance for our most valuable instrument, ourselves. These moments of pause don't detract from productivity. They fundamentally enhance it by allowing our internal systems to recalibrate and restore. What we'll explore in this chapter is the counterintuitive power of stepping back to move forward. We'll examine how reducing external noise enables you to recognize intuitive signals that guide better decisions. The constant barrage of notifications and information doesn't just distract us temporarily, it fundamentally reshapes our capacity to hear our own wisdom. Reconnecting with this inner guidance system requires deliberate practice, something few understand how to implement effectively in today's environment. The relationship between stillness and manifesting outcomes remains largely misunderstood. While the business world fixates on action and output, the most innovative breakthroughs often emerge from periods of apparent inactivity. This isn't mystical thinking, it's neuroscience. When we allow the brain's default mode network to activate during periods of rest, we engage our most powerful problem-solving capabilities. We'll examine practical approaches to harness this connection between quiet reflection and breakthrough results. Perhaps most critically, we'll develop the capacity for deep listening, both to ourselves and others. This skill has become increasingly rare, yet exponentially valuable. The ability to truly hear what's being communicated beyond words creates unprecedented advantages in personal relationships and professional environments. The practice of attentive listening in moments of stillness opens doorways to insights that remain inaccessible to those caught in perpetual motion. This chapter isn't about abandoning productivity or withdrawing from engagement. It's about discovering a more sustainable, intelligent way to operate that honors our human design. The stillness advantage isn't merely about preventing burnout, though it certainly does that. It's about accessing a higher level of functioning that the constantly connected miss entirely. By mastering these practices, you'll develop resilience that sustains long-term success while others around you falter from exhaustion. What follows is a roadmap for cultivating this advantage in practical, implementable ways. The noise isn't going away, but your relationship to it can fundamentally change. The question isn't whether you can afford to incorporate stillness into your life, but whether you can afford not to. The day Jack disconnected. Jack Kendall opened his eyes at 5 a.m. The blue light from his phone pierced the dark room. He had fallen asleep with it again, clutched in his hand like a talisman. The screen displayed 37 new emails since midnight. His thumb hovered over the notification. A dull pain throbbed behind his left eye. "Not now," he muttered, tossing the phone aside. It landed on the rumpled sheets with a soft thud. The ceiling fan spun above, its rhythmic whirring the only sound in the apartment. Jack rubbed his temples. 3 months of 16-hour workdays had hollowed him. His boss called it crunch time. Jack called it existence. The promotion dangled before him like a carrot, always just out of reach. In the bathroom, his reflection stared back with sunken eyes. The shower spray hit his back, hot needles against tense muscles. The water streamed down, washing away yesterday's sweat, but not the fatigue that had seeped into his bones. Steam filled the small space. Jack closed his eyes and tried to remember the breathing exercise his sister had taught him. 4 counts in, hold for 7. 8 counts out. The tension in his shoulders released a fraction. The coffee machine gurgled in the kitchen as Jack dressed. His phone buzzed on the nightstand, a calendar reminder for the project meeting at 7. Another buzz. A text from Sarah, "Don't forget dinner tonight, 7 p.m. Already rescheduled twice." He had forgotten. Again, the coffee smelled rich and dark. Outside his window, the city awakened. Car horns, distant sirens, the clatter of the garbage truck. Jack poured the coffee into his travel mug, the steam rising like a ghost. His laptop waited on the counter, closed but never truly off. The thought of opening it made his stomach tighten. Instead, Jack walked to the balcony and stepped outside. The morning air felt clean against his face. The sun crept above the horizon, painting the sky in strokes of orange and pink. A bird landed on the railing, regarded him with curious eyes, then flew away. Jack remembered how his grandfather used to sit on the porch each morning, doing nothing but watching the world. "The mind needs fallow time," he'd said, "same as a field." When had Jack last allowed himself that luxury? His phone buzzed again from inside. Jack ignored it. He set his coffee down on the small table and lowered himself to the cool concrete floor. Cross-legged, hands on knees, back straight. The position felt foreign after months of hunching over screens. 4 counts in, hold for 7, 8 counts out. The city noise receded. Something loosened in his chest, a knot he hadn't known was there. For 5 minutes, then 10, Jack sat. No emails, no projects, no deadlines, just breathing. When he finally rose, the sun had cleared the buildings. His coffee had cooled. His phone had buzzed 3 more times. But for the first time in months, Jack something like clarity. He picked up his phone and powered it off completely. The screen went black. The constant connection severed. He could give himself this morning, at least. His laptop would wait. The emails would wait. The project would wait. What would happen, Jack wondered as he sipped his cold coffee, if he treated his mind and body with the same care he gave his devices? No one expected a phone to run without charging, a computer to function without updates and rest periods. Why had he demanded this impossible standard from himself? The subtle art of intuition. In our information-saturated world, the ability to hear our intuition has become increasingly rare. Our phones ping, our inboxes overflow, and our thoughts race from one task to the next. This constant noise drowns out the whispers of our inner wisdom. When we're overwhelmed by external stimuli, we miss the subtle signals our intuition sends us. Think of your intuition as a shy friend who speaks only in whispers. In a crowded, noisy room, you'd never hear what this friend has to say. You might not even notice they're trying to communicate with you. But in a quiet space, their softest words become clear. This is how intuition works. It doesn't shout to compete with the chaos, it waits for stillness. Research shows that the brain processes information differently during periods of quiet. When we reduce external stimulation, the default mode network, DMN, activates. This neural network plays a crucial role in self-reflection, creativity, and intuitive thinking. Simply put, our brains are wired to access deeper insights when free from constant disruption. This biological reality underscores why silence isn't just nice, it's necessary for accessing our full mental capabilities. Recognizing intuitive signals requires practice. Start by creating small pockets of silence in your day. Turn off notifications during certain hours. Take 5 minutes to sit quietly before important meetings. Walk without headphones. These simple acts create space for intuition to emerge. The signals might come as a sudden knowing, a physical sensation in your body, or a persistent thought that doesn't align with logical analysis. Our modern culture has conditioned us to value external information over internal wisdom. We search Google before searching our own thoughts. We ask for advice before checking in with our gut feeling. This outward orientation disconnects us from our intuitive compass. Reclaiming your relationship with intuition means valuing your internal guidance system as highly as external data points. The language of intuition isn't always straightforward. It communicates through feelings, images, sudden insights, and physical sensations. Learning to interpret these signals takes time. Notice patterns in how your intuition speaks to you. Does it manifest as a tightness in your chest when something isn't right, or perhaps a sense of lightness when you're on the right track? By paying attention to these patterns, you build a personal dictionary for your intuitive language. Distractions don't just interrupt our focus, they interrupt our connection to ourselves. Each time we check social media while feeling uncomfortable emotions, we miss an opportunity to receive important intuitive information. Each time we fill silence with noise, we drown out the very guidance that could lead us to better decisions. Creating boundaries around technology isn't just about productivity, it's about preserving your connection to your deepest wisdom. Physical environments significantly impact our ability to hear intuitive signals. Cluttered spaces create cluttered minds. Noisy surroundings generate noisy thoughts. Consider designing at least one area in your home or office specifically for quiet reflection. This doesn't require elaborate meditation rooms. Just a chair by a window or a corner with minimal visual distractions can become your intuition listening post. When we reduce external noise, we create the necessary conditions for intuition to speak, and only then can we access the wisdom that lives beneath the surface of our conscious awareness. The stillness-intuition connection. The relationship between stillness and intuition runs deeper than most realize. When we cultivate moments of quiet, we're not just taking a break, we're activating ancient mechanisms of perception that operate below conscious awareness. These mechanisms evolved long before smartphones and spreadsheets, honed through millennia to help humans navigate complex environments with incomplete information. Stillness creates the conditions for intuition to flourish. Why? Because intuition requires mental bandwidth. When your cognitive resources are consumed by processing external stimuli or executing complex tasks, little remains available for the subtle pattern recognition that drives intuitive insights. It's like trying to hear a whisper while standing next to a jackhammer. Have you ever noticed how your best ideas come during a shower, while walking in nature, or just before falling asleep? These aren't coincidences. These moments share a common element, the relaxation of focused attention. When the mind isn't actively problem-solving, it shifts into a diffuse mode of thinking. This diffuse mode connects disparate pieces of information in novel ways, often leading to those aha moments we associate with intuition. The manifestation of desired outcomes often follows a curious pattern. First comes stillness, then intuitive insight, followed by aligned action. Without that middle step, the intuitive insight, our actions lack the subtle guidance that leads to extraordinary results. We end up forcing outcomes through sheer will rather than flowing with our deeper knowing. Imagine trying to paddle upstream when the current of your intuition is showing you an easier route downstream. This is what happens when we act without first listening. Across history, great innovators, artists, and leaders have understood this connection intuitively. Einstein took long walks and sailing trips where he deliberately avoided thinking about physics problems. During these periods of mental relaxation, solutions would often emerge spontaneously. Steve Jobs practiced meditation and attributed much of his creative vision to the clarity it provided. Maya Angelou sought quiet mornings to hear her creative voice. These practices weren't incidental to their success, they were foundational. The path from intuition to manifestation isn't always straightforward. Sometimes the insights we receive don't make logical sense at first. They might even contradict conventional wisdom or expert advice. This is where trust becomes essential. Building trust in your intuition is similar to developing any relationship. It requires time, attention, and validation through experience. Each time you follow an intuitive nudge and find it leads to positive outcomes, you strengthen this trust. Stillness practices don't need to be elaborate or time-consuming to be effective. Even brief moments of undistracted awareness can create openings for intuitive guidance. Try this simple exercise. Before making a decision, take 3 deep breaths while focusing your awareness on the center of your chest. Then ask yourself, what do I know about this situation that I'm not fully acknowledging? The answer that emerges might surprise you with its clarity and wisdom. The quality of your stillness matters as much as the quantity. 10 minutes of genuine mental quiet can yield more intuitive insight than hours of meditation where the mind remains busy planning and analyzing. True stillness has a distinctive feeling, a sense of spaciousness and presence that contrasts sharply with our normal mental chatter. In this space, intuition doesn't have to compete with the noise of shoulds and shouldn'ts that normally fill our thoughts. Our technological environment presents unique challenges to this process. Notifications, emails, and the constant availability of information keep our attention fractured. Each interruption pulls us from deeper states of awareness back to surface-level processing. Creating technological boundaries isn't just good digital hygiene, it's essential intuition protection. Consider implementing insight hours where devices are turned off completely, allowing your mind the freedom to access deeper knowing. The cycle of stillness, intuition, and manifestation becomes more powerful with repetition. As you practice listening to and acting on intuitive guidance, you'll notice a shift in how opportunities and resources align around you. What once seemed like luck or coincidence reveals itself as the natural result of actions aligned with deeper wisdom. Your efforts become more efficient because they're guided by a more comprehensive understanding than logic alone can provide. What might become possible in your life if you trusted the wisdom that emerges in stillness as much as you trust the data on your spreadsheets? Developing deep listening skills. Learning to listen deeply is both simpler and more challenging than most people realize. At its core, deep listening requires only one thing: your complete attention. Yet in our distraction-filled world, giving undivided attention has become rare. We half listen while thinking about our response. We nod while mentally building shopping lists. We hear words without absorbing their meaning. True listening begins with self-awareness. Before you can listen deeply to others, you must first learn to listen to yourself. This means regularly checking in with your own internal state. How does your body feel right now? What emotions are present? What thoughts keep circulating? These self-check-ins build the muscle of awareness that makes deep listening possible. Practice this several times daily, even for just 30 seconds, to strengthen your listening foundation. The physical environment significantly impacts our ability to listen. Research shows that even low-level background noise reduces cognitive performance and increases stress hormones. Create dedicated spaces for important conversations, places where distractions are minimized and comfort is maximized. Turn off notifications, silence phones, and when possible, connect in natural settings where ambient sounds support rather than hinder attention. Listening deeply resembles the way a tree develops roots. On the surface, a tree might appear still and unchanging, but beneath the ground, an intricate network of roots continuously extends, seeking nourishment and stability. Similarly, in moments of apparent stillness, your awareness can extend deeper into conversations, gathering subtle information and forming connections that might otherwise remain hidden. The IAA framework: intuitive awareness, acceptance, and action. The intuitive listening model provides a structured approach to developing deep listening skills in our noisy world. This framework helps transform ordinary silence into productive stillness, where intuition can flourish. By following these three interconnected stages, awareness, acceptance, and action, you can systematically enhance your ability to hear life's whispers. Awareness, creating receptive space. The awareness pillar forms the foundation of intuitive listening. Without awareness, the other components cannot function effectively. This stage focuses on creating the conditions where intuition can emerge clearly. Physical awareness begins with your environment. Designate specific spaces in your home or office as listening zones, where external distractions are minimized. This might be a comfortable chair by a window, a corner of your garden, or even your car parked in a peaceful location. The key is consistency. Using the same space regularly trains your mind to enter a receptive state more quickly when you return there. Mental awareness involves recognizing and managing internal distractions. Practice noticing when your mind wanders during conversations or quiet moments. Without judgment, gently return your attention to the present. Apps like Headspace or Calm can help develop this skill through guided meditation, but simple breathing exercises work equally well. Try counting your breaths from 1 to 10, starting over when your mind wanders. This builds the mental muscle needed for sustained attention. Digital awareness may be the most crucial element for modern listeners. Implement daily tech-free periods where all devices are turned off or put away. Start with just 30 minutes and gradually increase. Use tools like website blockers during work hours and app timers to limit social media use. Consider a digital sunset where screens are avoided for 1 to 2 hours before bedtime. These boundaries create space for your intuition to speak without technological interruption. The relationship between these awareness practices creates a powerful synergy. When physical, mental, and digital space is cleared simultaneously, intuitive signals become significantly clearer. Think of it as tuning a radio. When you remove static, distractions, the broadcast intuition becomes crisp and clear. Acceptance, embracing intuitive signals. The acceptance pillar builds upon awareness by focusing on how we receive and process intuitive information. Many people create space for listening, but then dismiss the insights that arise. Acceptance addresses this disconnect. Recognizing intuitive signals is the first step. These signals typically arrive in 4 ways: physical sensations, gut feelings, chest tightness, emotional responses, unexpected joy or unease, mental images or thoughts that arise spontaneously, and dreams or insights during relaxed states. Keep a journal documenting these signals and the situations where they occur to identify your personal intuitive patterns. Distinguishing between genuine intuition and fear-based thinking requires practice. Intuitive insights typically feel neutral or positive, even when delivering challenging information. They arrive with a sense of clarity rather than confusion. Fear-based thoughts, by contrast, generate anxiety and often involve catastrophizing. Ask yourself, does this thought expand my perspective or narrow it? Intuition typically expands, while fear constricts. Acceptance practices strengthen your relationship with intuition over time. Try the 3-breath technique when receiving an intuitive hit. Take 3 deep breaths before responding to or analyzing the insight. This creates space between reception and judgment, allowing the full message to emerge. Additionally, practice provisional trust, acting as if the intuition might be valid without requiring immediate proof. This opens you to possibilities your logical mind might otherwise reject. The barriers to acceptance often stem from cultural conditioning that prioritizes analytical thinking. Many professionals fear appearing irrational if they acknowledge intuitive insights. Reframe this by understanding that intuition represents pattern recognition operating below conscious awareness, a form of intelligence rather than its absence. Research in neuroscience increasingly supports this view, showing intuition often integrates more information than conscious analysis alone. Action: implementing intuitive guidance. The action pillar completes the framework by focusing on how we translate intuitive insights into concrete steps. Without action, awareness and acceptance remain theoretical exercises rather than transformative practices. Implementing intuitive guidance often requires courage, especially when it contradicts conventional wisdom. Start with low-risk experiments, small decisions where you consciously choose the intuitive option rather than the logical one. Document the outcomes to build an evidence base for your intuitive accuracy. This creates a feedback loop that strengthens trust in future insights. Communicating intuitive decisions to others presents unique challenges. When explaining choices based on intuition, focus on the concrete aspects you can articulate. Based on my experience with similar situations, or I've noticed patterns that suggest. Frame intuition as supplementary to, rather than replacing, analytical thinking. This helps bridge the gap between your internal knowing and external expectations. Integration practices help maintain connection to intuition during implementation. Check in regularly with your body and feelings as you take action. Does the path still feel aligned, or has something shifted? Unlike rigid plans, intuitive action remains responsive to new information. Set specific review points to reassess and adjust as needed, maintaining the flexibility that characterizes intuitive navigation. The cyclical nature of the IOA framework creates an upward spiral of intuitive development. Each time you move through awareness to acceptance to action, your ability to access and trust intuition strengthens. Successful outcomes reinforce the value of the process, while even mistakes provide valuable calibration data. Over time, this creates what psychologists call unconscious competence. Intuitive listening becomes second nature rather than requiring conscious effort. By cultivating awareness of our inner and outer environments, accepting the intuitive signals that emerge in stillness, and taking aligned action on these insights, we transform listening from a passive activity into a dynamic practice that connects us more deeply to ourselves, others, and the subtle wisdom available in every moment. The pause that renews. The hustle culture glorifies perpetual motion. It celebrates the entrepreneur working 80-hour weeks, the parent juggling multiple responsibilities without a break, the professional always available via email. This relentless pace has become a strange badge of honor, as if exhaustion signals importance and value. Yet beneath this cultural narrative lies a biological reality we cannot escape. Humans need rest. Your nervous system operates through a delicate balance between sympathetic activation and parasympathetic relaxation states. When we remain constantly activated, responding to emails, meeting deadlines, managing crises, we deplete our resources faster than they can replenish. The resulting imbalance manifests as burnout, emotional exhaustion, cynicism, and reduced effectiveness. This isn't weakness or failure. It's simply how human biology functions. Consider the way a field needs to lie fallow periodically to maintain its fertility. Farmers have known for centuries that continuous planting depletes soil nutrients, eventually rendering the land unproductive. The same principle applies to human energy. Without periods of genuine rest, our productive capacity diminishes until even simple tasks require enormous effort. The pause isn't just pleasant, it's productive in its own right, restoring the very resources that make meaningful work possible. Technological connectivity has erased many natural boundaries that once protected our downtime. Work follows us home via smartphones. Entertainment options stream 24/7. Social media never closes. This constant availability creates a background hum of activation that prevents true relaxation. Even when physically still, our nervous systems remain vigilant, scanning for the next notification or opportunity. Creating technological boundaries becomes essential for health in this environment. Regular practices like yoga, deep breathing, and meditation offer powerful antidotes to chronic stress. These aren't just feel-good activities, they trigger measurable biological responses. Deep breathing activates the vagus nerve, which helps regulate heart rate and blood pressure while promoting digestive function. Yoga combines movement with breath awareness, releasing physical tension while calming the mind. Meditation strengthens attention control and reduces reactivity to stressors. These practices don't require hours. Even 10 minutes daily creates meaningful benefits. The quality of your pause matters more than its duration. A truly restorative break involves both physical and mental disengagement from demands. Scrolling social media while physically resting doesn't reset your system. Neither does worrying about work while taking a walk. Effective downtime requires presence, full engagement with the restorative activity, whatever it may be. This might mean leaving your phone at home during your nature walk or setting a timer for undistracted relaxation. Think of downtime as strategic rather than self-indulgent. Elite athletes understand that recovery isn't optional, it's an essential part of performance. Similarly, cognitive and emotional recovery isn't a luxury, it's a necessity for sustainable effectiveness in any domain. Reframing rest as a strategic advantage rather than a weakness helps overcome the guilt many feel when stepping away from productivity. When you prioritize physical and technological downtime, you're not avoiding responsibility, you're ensuring your continued ability to meet it with energy, creativity, and wisdom. When life speaks in whispers, the most valuable insights often arrive not as thunderous revelations, but as quiet whispers. These subtle messages emerge during moments of stillness, the walk without headphones, the morning before checking email, the evening with devices powered down. Yet most of us fill these potential listening spaces with noise. We fear silence or find it uncomfortable. We reach for distraction at the first hint of boredom. This avoidance has consequences beyond missed intuition. Research shows that constant stimulation reduces creativity, impairs decision-making, and contributes to anxiety. Our brains need periods of unstructured thought to process experiences, form new connections, and integrate learning. Without these mental rest periods, we operate with fragmented understanding and diminished perspective. The answers you seek never come when the mind is busy, writes spiritual teacher Eckhart Tolle. They come when the mind is still. This wisdom appears across diverse traditions because it reflects a universal truth. Clarity emerges from quietude. The solution to complex problems rarely comes through forcing more thought, but through creating space where insight can surface naturally. Imagine your consciousness as a lake. When constantly disturbed by activity and input, the surface remains choppy, reflecting distorted images of reality. Only when allowed to settle does the water become clear enough to see what lies beneath. This clarity doesn't require extraordinary circumstances, just ordinary moments free from disturbance. The quiet drive home, the shower, the moments before sleep. These everyday pauses offer windows into deeper awareness when we recognize their value. Developing a relationship with silence takes practice. Start with small doses, 5 minutes without stimulation each morning. Sit with any discomfort that arises without immediately filling the space. Notice the urge to reach for your phone or turn on music. Each time you resist this urge, you strengthen your capacity for presence. Gradually, what began as uncomfortable emptiness transforms into rich stillness filled with subtle information previously drowned out by noise. The connection between external quiet and internal clarity grows stronger with repetition. Each deliberate pause creates neural pathways that make subsequent stillness more accessible and productive. What began as discipline becomes preference as you experience the benefits firsthand. Better decisions, enhanced creativity, improved relationships, and a deeper sense of connection to yourself and others. By creating regular pauses in your day, moments free from technological input and productive output, you develop the ability to hear life's most valuable messages, which never arrive as shouts, but always as whispers. The technology reset digital devices have transformed from tools into constants, perpetually present in our hands, pockets, and awareness. The average American checks their phone 96 times daily, once every 10 minutes of waking life. This persistent connectivity keeps our nervous systems in a mild but chronic state of arousal. Notifications trigger dopamine release, creating reward cycles that keep us checking even when no new information exists. A digital reset doesn't require abandoning technology altogether. Instead, it means establishing conscious boundaries that preserve your mental ecology. Start by identifying your most distracting digital habits. Is it social media, news, email, work apps? Once identified, create specific rules around these activities. Perhaps social media only after 6 p.m. or email checked just 3 times daily. The specifics matter less than the principle. Technology serves you, not vice versa. Physical space plays a crucial role in technological boundaries. Designate certain areas as device-free zones, particularly bedrooms and dining spaces. This creates environmental cues that support your intentions. Charge devices outside the bedroom to eliminate the temptation of checking notifications at night or first thing in the morning. Use a real alarm clock rather than your phone. These small adjustments create powerful shifts in attention patterns. The world's most precious resource isn't oil or gold or cryptocurrency, writes technology ethicist Tristan Harris. It's human attention. This perspective highlights why technological boundaries matter so deeply. Each moment spent absorbing content designed to capture and hold attention is a moment unavailable for deeper thought, genuine connection, or intuitive insight. By reclaiming portions of your attention, you reclaim portions of your life. The symptoms of digital overwhelm resemble those of general burnout, but with specific technological elements. Phantom vibrations, feeling your phone buzz when it hasn't, anxiety when separated from devices, and inability to focus on single tasks for extended periods all signal unhealthy digital dependence. If these symptoms sound familiar, a more structured digital reset may be necessary, perhaps a weekend completely offline or daily tech-free hours. Implementing a systematic approach to technology use creates space for recovery and renewal. The 5-3-1 method offers one simple structure. 5 hours before bed, stop work-related digital activities. 3 hours before bed, end all productive screen use. 1 hour before bed, eliminate all screens completely. This gradual withdrawal allows your nervous system to downregulate progressively, improving sleep quality and creating space for reflective thought. The benefits of technological boundaries extend beyond stress reduction. Research shows that periods of technological disconnection improve attention span, enhance face-to-face communication skills, and increase empathy. Creative thinking flourishes during digital breaks as the mind wanders freely rather than following predetermined pathways. Memory consolidation improves without constant interruption. Even problem-solving abilities sharpen when given space from continuous input. Creating regular, intentional breaks from technology isn't about rejecting progress. It's about preserving the uniquely human capacities that technology cannot replace: deep thought, intuitive wisdom, and genuine presence. The body speaks. Your physical body communicates constantly through sensations, energy levels, and subtle signals. These bodily messages contain valuable information about your needs, boundaries, and intuitive knowing. Yet many of us have learned to override these signals, pushing through fatigue, ignoring tension, and dismissing discomfort until the body must shout through illness or injury to be heard. Somatic awareness, the ability to notice and interpret physical sensations, forms the foundation of embodied intuition. This skill develops through regular body scans, where you systematically bring attention to different areas, noting sensations without judgment. Start at your feet and move slowly upward, spending 15 to 30 seconds on each body region. Practice this daily to strengthen your connection to physical wisdom. Research in neuroscience confirms what contemplative traditions have taught for millennia. The body processes information before conscious awareness catches up. The insula, a brain region associated with interoception, internal sensing, activates in response to subtle changes long before we can articulate what we're feeling. This explains why you might sense something's off about a situation before identifying why. Your body detected discrepancies your conscious mind hadn't yet processed. Deep breathing serves as both diagnostic tool and intervention. When you pause to take several conscious breaths, you create space to notice what your body is communicating. Simultaneously, the breathing itself triggers the parasympathetic nervous system, shifting from stress response toward relaxation. Try this. Before important decisions or during challenging conversations, take 3 deep breaths while scanning your body. The information that emerges might surprise you with its clarity and relevance. Movement practices like yoga, tai chi, or simple stretching create dialogue with the body. These activities combine physical awareness with mindful attention, strengthening the neural pathways between sensation and perception. Regular movement sessions, even just 10 minutes daily, enhance your ability to detect and interpret bodily signals before they escalate to problems. Consider them listening sessions with your physical wisdom rather than merely exercise. The body's rhythms offer natural pauses when honored. Hunger signals time for nourishment and a break from activity. Fatigue indicates need for rest. Energy fluctuations throughout the day suggest optimal times for different types of work. By aligning your schedule with these natural rhythms rather than overriding them, you reduce stress and increase effectiveness. This might mean scheduling creative work during your personal energy peaks or taking brief rest periods when alertness naturally dips. Sleep represents perhaps the most important bodily rhythm in our technologically disrupted era. During deep sleep, the glymphatic system, the brain's cleaning mechanism, activates, clearing metabolic waste that accumulates during waking hours. This process proves essential for cognitive function, emotional regulation, and physical health. Prioritizing sleep quality through consistent schedules, screen-free evenings, and comfortable sleep environments isn't indulgent. It's fundamental maintenance for your most valuable asset. When you create space to hear your body's whispers, you access wisdom that precedes and transcends intellectual understanding, wisdom that guides you toward what you truly need, rather than what you think you should want. Beyond the burnout cycle, burnout isn't simply tiredness. It's a state of chronic stress characterized by emotional exhaustion, cynicism, and reduced effectiveness. This condition develops gradually through prolonged exposure to stressors without adequate recovery. The World Health Organization now recognizes burnout as an occupational phenomenon specifically related to unmanaged workplace stress. Yet its impact extends far beyond professional performance into relationships, health, and overall life satisfaction. The physiological mechanisms behind burnout involve complex hormonal cascades. Chronic stress elevates cortisol levels, which eventually disrupts sleep, impairs immune function, and affects cognitive performance. The body essentially becomes stuck in a low-grade fight-or-flight response, consuming resources faster than they can replenish. This biological reality explains why willpower alone cannot overcome burnout. The very systems needed for self-regulation become compromised. Preventing burnout requires strategic implementation of boundaries and practices that honor human limitations. This isn't weakness, but wisdom. Just as an athlete designs training schedules with recovery periods to prevent injury and optimize performance, knowledge workers must design work patterns that include recovery to prevent cognitive and emotional depletion. This might mean scheduling meetings with breaks between them, taking actual lunch breaks away from work, or implementing firm end times to workdays. The culture of constant productivity often associates rest with laziness. This false dichotomy ignores the cyclical nature of human energy and performance. Research in chronobiology, the study of biological rhythms, shows that humans function optimally in cycles of activity and recovery. Working with these natural cycles rather than against them maximizes both productivity and sustainability. The most effective professionals aren't those who work longest, but those who work smartly within their biological constraints. Simple physical practices offer powerful protection against burnout. Regular movement, even brief walks between meetings, helps clear stress hormones and reset the nervous system. Breathwork provides immediate physiological regulation during challenging moments. Adequate hydration and nutrition support cognitive function and energy regulation. While these basics might seem obvious, they're often the first elements sacrificed when workloads increase, creating a counterproductive cycle where decreasing self-care leads to decreasing effectiveness. Technology boundaries prove especially crucial in burnout prevention. The expectation of constant availability creates what researchers call telepressure, the perceived obligation to respond immediately to messages regardless of timing or importance. This state keeps stress hormones elevated and prevents true downtime, creating clear communication norms around response times, implementing notification settings that minimize interruptions, and establishing tech-free periods all help create necessary psychological space. Recovery from existing burnout requires more than just time off. True restoration involves addressing the patterns that created burnout in the first place. This often means reassessing priorities, implementing sustainable boundaries, and developing regular practices that support well-being. For many, it also involves challenging perfectionism, people-pleasing tendencies, or identity structures that equate worth with productivity. Recovery becomes not just about feeling better, but about creating a fundamentally different relationship with work and self. By recognizing the biological necessity of downtime and implementing practices that honor your human limitations, you transform from a victim of burnout into the architect of sustainable success and well-being. As our exploration of silence comes to a close, we've uncovered something profound yet often overlooked in our hyper-connected world. The quieter we become, the more we can hear. The hustle culture has programmed us to equate constant motion with progress, but this mindset extracts a devastating toll on our well-being. The signals of intuition can't compete with the cacophony of notifications, meetings, and digital chatter we've normalized. By systematically reducing external noise, we create the conditions for inner wisdom to emerge. This isn't abstract philosophy, it's practical psychology. When you clear the input channels, your brain naturally processes deeper insights that typically remain buried beneath surface-level reactivity. The connection between stillness and manifesting outcomes isn't mystical, but neurological. In quiet states, our brains shift from reactive beta waves to more creative alpha and theta states. This is where patterns connect, solutions emerge, and the mind becomes receptive rather than resistant. Your ability to envision and create your desired future depends directly on these moments of receptive clarity. The practice of deep listening to yourself and others builds a foundation for everything else in your personal and professional life. It's the antidote to the superficial understanding that plagues most interactions. When you truly listen from a place of stillness, you absorb not just words but intentions, not just data but meaning. The physical and technological downtime we've discussed isn't a luxury, it's a necessity. The human operating system was never designed for perpetual connectivity. Your body and mind require regular periods of true rest to process, integrate, and restore. The practices we've explored, from intentional tech-free zones to mindful breathing techniques, serve as circuit breakers in an otherwise overwhelming electrical system. Burnout isn't a badge of honor or an inevitable career milestone. It's a warning sign that you've abandoned the natural rhythms that sustain human flourishing. By implementing the stillness practices outlined in this chapter, you're not just preventing collapse, you're establishing the conditions for sustainable success and genuine fulfillment. The silence advantage isn't about escaping life's demands. It's about meeting them with your full capacity rather than your depleted reserves. When you regularly step away from the noise, you return with greater clarity, creativity, and compassion, the very qualities that separate exceptional performance from mediocre output. Tomorrow, find one moment to practice deliberate silence. Notice what emerges when you stop filling every second with stimulation. This small beginning plants the seed for a transformative relationship with stillness, one that will continue to yield insights long after the external noise has faded away. Chapter 7, Slow is Smooth, Smooth is Fast, the paradox that elite performers understand that most people miss. In a world obsessed with speed, the most profound achievements often emerge from stillness. This isn't mystical philosophy, it's practical reality. Navy SEALs, master surgeons, and world-class negotiators all understand what most of us have forgotten. Rushing creates mistakes, while deliberate pacing creates mastery. The military adage, slow is smooth, smooth is fast, reveals a counterintuitive truth about peak performance that applies far beyond tactical operations. When we deliberately slow down, we actually accelerate our progress toward what matters most. The most common objection I hear when discussing intentional pauses is predictable. I don't have time to slow down. This reaction stems from our culture's fundamental misunderstanding of productivity. We've confused motion with progress, busyness with effectiveness. The research is clear. Our brains aren't designed for constant acceleration. The cognitive price we pay for uninterrupted activity isn't just burnout, it's diminished creativity, flawed decision making, and relationships that gradually erode under the pressure of perpetual hurry. Throughout this book, we've explored how the strategic use of stillness provides a competitive advantage in virtually every domain of life. We've examined how successful leaders integrate moments of reflection between actions, how relationships deepen through attentive presence, and how our most innovative breakthroughs often emerge not from frantic effort, but from intentional disengagement. The pattern is unmistakable. Those who master the rhythm of engagement and reflection consistently outperform those trapped in constant motion. As we approach this final chapter before our conclusion, we're ready to integrate everything we've learned into a comprehensive framework that transforms how you approach both work and life. The principles we'll explore aren't simply techniques to try, they represent a fundamental shift in how you relate to time, attention, and your own potential. By challenging the assumption that faster is always better, we open the door to a more sophisticated understanding of performance that elite achievers have long understood. The paradox at the heart of this chapter is that slowing down actually accelerates your progress toward what matters most. We'll explore how principles from martial arts, where efficiency and effectiveness are literally matters of life and death, can be applied to everyday tasks with remarkable results. You'll discover why most people's approach to productivity is fundamentally backward, and how a more deliberate pace creates not just better outcomes, but a more satisfying experience along the way. Perhaps most importantly, you'll be invited to conduct your own experiment in deliberate pacing. Rather than accepting my assertions at face value, you'll document the effects of intentional pauses on your productivity, decision quality, and overall life satisfaction. This isn't abstract theory, it's practical wisdom you can verify through direct experience. By journaling your observations and reviewing them systematically, you'll develop personalized insights about when slowing down serves you best. The practices in this chapter bridge the gap between knowing and doing. While most people intellectually understand the value of occasional pauses, few have developed the discipline to implement them consistently. Through structured techniques like the Pomodoro method and reflective journaling, you'll build the capacity to integrate stillness into your daily rhythms without sacrificing productivity. In fact, you'll discover that these practices don't merely preserve your effectiveness, they dramatically enhance it by allowing you to engage with deeper wisdom and clarity than rush thinking permits. As we begin this exploration, I invite you to temporarily suspend your assumptions about productivity and performance. The path to mastery isn't about working harder in the conventional sense. It's about working with greater awareness, intention, and rhythm. When you finish this chapter, you'll understand why elite performers across disciplines share this seemingly counterintuitive insight. To move faster toward what matters most, sometimes you need to slow down. The power of stillness in a chaotic world. The train rumbled beneath his feet. Martin gripped the overhead rail with one hand, his knuckles white against the silver pole, while his other hand clutched his worn leather journal. The morning crowd pressed against him, a mass of bodies and briefcases moving as one with the sway of the car. Through the smudged window, the city blurred past, steel and glass catching the morning light. 2 more stops, he thought, checking his watch. 7 minutes remained in his morning Pomodoro session. The technique had become his salvation these past months, carving order from chaos. 25 minutes of focused work, 5 minutes of rest. Simple mathematics that somehow rewired his frantic mind. He'd started applying it not just to his work projects, but to his entire day, including his commute. This morning train ride, his thinking time. Martin opened his journal, balancing it against his forearm as the train lurched around a bend. Yesterday's entry stared back at him. Feeling overwhelmed again. Projects piling up. Claire says I'm distant. The words sent a pang through his chest. Claire was right. He'd been physically present but mentally elsewhere for weeks now. His promotion had brought new responsibilities that consumed him. The pages of his journal told the story of a man gradually disappearing into his work. Yet somewhere in those same pages, between the hurried scrawls of meeting notes and project deadlines, lay the solution. Martin had discovered it 3 weeks ago during a scheduled reflection period. The power of intentional pauses. The train slowed as it approached the station. Bodies shifted, preparing to exit. Martin closed his journal and tucked it into his bag. Outside, the morning sun cast long shadows across the platform. He stepped off the train and felt the cool morning air against his face. Unlike the others who rushed toward the station exits, Martin walked to a bench and sat down. His watch beeped softly. 5 minutes of rest had begun. He closed his eyes and breathed deeply, feeling the tension in his shoulders release. In this momentary stillness between the cacophony of the departing train and the day that awaited him, Martin found clarity. The solution to his work challenges, the path back to connection with Claire, they weren't separate problems, but different manifestations of the same issue. He needed to bring the same intentional pauses to his relationship that had transformed his work life. The insight washed over him like the sun now warming his face. He opened his journal again and wrote a single line. The space between notes creates the music. What transformative insights might emerge in your life if you created deliberate spaces for stillness and reflection amidst the constant motion? The martial way. The martial arts teach us a powerful paradox. Rushing creates mistakes, while deliberate, measured movements lead to greater speed and effectiveness. This principle, slow is smooth, smooth is fast, originates from combat training, where precision matters more than raw speed. When martial artists train, they begin movements slowly, perfecting form and technique before gradually increasing speed. Each repetition builds muscle memory, allowing complex sequences to eventually flow with both precision and velocity. This approach creates a foundation where true speed emerges not from hurrying, but from eliminating wasted motion. Picture water flowing through a stream. Where the channel is clear and unobstructed, water moves swiftly and efficiently. Where rocks, debris, and turns create resistance, the water slows, backs up, sometimes even overflows its banks. Our daily tasks follow the same natural law. When we rush through activities without proper preparation or presence, we create our own obstacles, mistakes that require correction, details missed that demand revisiting, quality compromise that necessitates rework. Research consistently shows that multitasking reduces productivity by up to 40%. What appears to be efficiency, doing multiple things at once, actually creates cognitive switching costs. Each time we jump between tasks, our brain requires time to reorient, resulting in mental friction that slows overall progress. The martial approach offers an alternative, single tasking with full presence. By giving complete attention to one movement before flowing to the next, we eliminate the costly transitions of divided focus. The principle applies beyond physical tasks. In communication, measured words delivered with clarity often achieve more than rushed explanations. In problem solving, a methodical approach identifies solutions that hasty analysis might miss. In leadership, thoughtful decisions typically outperform reactive ones. Even in creativity, deliberate incubation periods frequently yield better insights than forced productivity. The key lies in understanding that slowness isn't about delay, it's about deliberate practice that eliminates inefficiency. This martial wisdom translates directly to daily life through practical techniques. Start each morning by identifying your 3 most important tasks, then approach them sequentially with full focus. Break complex projects into distinct phases, mastering each component before integration. Create preparatory routines that eliminate common friction points, laying out materials before starting, clearing digital distractions, or establishing clear criteria for completion. When mistakes occur, treat them as feedback for improvement rather than failures requiring self-criticism. The path to greater efficiency paradoxically begins with slowing down, creating the space for smooth execution that ultimately delivers faster, better results. The speed delusion. Modern culture celebrates speed as an unquestionable virtue. Email responses within minutes, same-day delivery, instant downloads. We've built systems that continually compress time between desire and fulfillment. This acceleration extends beyond technology into our professional identities. The busy executive with a packed calendar, the entrepreneur working 80-hour weeks, the parent managing multiple activities while maintaining a career, these have become our archetypes of success. Speed and volume of activity serve as proxies for productivity, value, and even character. Yet beneath this celebration of velocity lies a troubling reality. A 2018 Gallup study found that 23% of full-time employees reported feeling burned out very often or always, with an additional 44% feeling burned out sometimes. The World Health Organization now recognizes burnout as an occupational phenomenon characterized by energy depletion, increased mental distance from one's job, and reduced professional efficacy. These aren't signs of thriving, but of a system pushing human capacity beyond sustainable limits. The faster we go, the more we sacrifice reflection, creativity, and often effectiveness itself. Speed creates a particular kind of blindness. When moving too quickly, we lack perspective to question whether we're solving the right problems or pursuing appropriate goals. As management thinker Peter Drucker noted, there is nothing so useless as doing efficiently that which should not be done at all. Organizations frequently celebrate efficient execution of strategies that lead nowhere important. Individuals pride themselves on clearing overflowing inboxes without questioning why the emails exist in the first place. The true productivity question isn't how fast can I go, but where should I be going and what pace will get me there successfully. Consider the difference between efficiency and effectiveness. Efficiency focuses on doing things right, minimizing wasted effort, maximizing output per unit of input. Effectiveness concerns doing the right things, activities that meaningfully advance important goals. Our speed obsession often sacrifices the latter for the former. We become so focused on checking boxes quickly that we lose sight of whether those boxes matter. True productivity requires both, doing the right things in the right way, and sometimes the right way involves deliberate pacing. Think of your attention as the soil in a garden. Just as soil needs periods of rest and nourishment to remain fertile, your cognitive capacity requires recovery cycles to maintain quality. Continuous harvesting without restoration depletes the ground. Similarly, constant demand without adequate renewal diminishes your mental capacity. The most productive people understand this rhythm. They work intensely for periods, then deliberately disengage to allow recovery and integration. This oscillation between focused effort and strategic disengagement creates sustainable productivity that outperforms chronic acceleration. Speed also undermines connection with ourselves and others. Rushed conversations rarely build meaningful relationships. Hurried decisions often miss critical nuances. Accelerated living leaves little space for the spontaneous moments where joy and insight frequently emerge. Perhaps most importantly, constant motion creates a barrier to self-awareness. Without pauses for reflection, we lose touch with our own patterns, needs, and deeper purposes. The Japanese concept of ma, the meaningful space between elements, reminds us that what happens in the gaps often matters as much as what happens in the activity. What might you discover about yourself, your work, and your relationships if you deliberately slowed down for 1 week? The personal pace experiment. Conducting a personal experiment with slower living doesn't require radical life changes or lengthy sabbaticals. It begins with intentional micro-adjustments to your daily rhythm. Start by identifying one activity each day that you typically rush through, perhaps your morning routine, a recurring meeting, or your commute. For 1 week, allocate 25% more time to this activity than you normally would. Notice what changes when you remove the time pressure. Does your thinking become clearer? Do you notice details previously missed? Does your stress level decrease? Document these observations in a simple journal entry at day's end. The experiment continues by introducing structured pauses throughout your workday. The Pomodoro technique offers one framework, 25 minutes of focused work, followed by a 5-minute break, with a longer pause after 4 cycles. During these intentional breaks, resist the temptation to switch to another productive task. Instead, truly disengage. Look out a window, stretch, breathe deeply, or simply sit quietly. These micro breaks aren't wasted time, but essential recovery periods that preserve cognitive resources and prevent the diminishing returns of continuous effort. Your body provides valuable data during this experiment. Pay attention to physical indicators of pace, tension in your shoulders, depth of breathing, quality of sleep, energy fluctuations. Our physiology often signals when our pace exceeds sustainable limits long before our conscious mind acknowledges it. Document these physical observations alongside your performance notes. You may discover that slowing down actually increases your stamina for important work rather than reducing your output as feared. Consider a river flowing toward the ocean. At points where the river narrows, the water appears to move with impressive speed and force, churning, splashing, creating dramatic rapids. Yet in wider sections where the river slows and deepens, it actually carries more volume with less visible drama. Our productivity often follows this pattern. Frenetic activity may feel more productive, creating the sensation of momentum, while a measured pace quietly accomplishes more with less energy expenditure. Your experiment tests this hypothesis in your own life. The most revealing aspect of this experiment comes from tracking not just what you accomplish, but how you experience your life during this period. Note changes in your satisfaction with your work, the quality of your interactions, your sense of purpose and meaning. Productivity isn't merely about volume of output, but about the value of that output and the sustainability of the process. A pace that produces impressive short-term results while depleting your well-being ultimately fails the true productivity test. Extend your experiment by identifying your personal prime time, the hours when your energy and focus naturally peak. For some, this comes early morning. For others, late evening or mid-afternoon. During this one-week experiment, protect these hours fiercely for your most important creative or analytical work. Schedule meetings, email, and routine tasks for your non-prime hours. This alignment of energy with priority creates a natural efficiency that outperforms artificial acceleration. By deliberately adjusting your pace, documenting the effects, and reflecting on the results, you integrate all three learning objectives. Applying martial wisdom to everyday efficiency, challenging the faster is better assumption, and discovering your personal optimal rhythm for both productivity and satisfaction. The reflection advantage. The power of the pause extends beyond the moment of action into how we process our experiences. Regular reflection transforms ordinary experiences into extraordinary learning. Set aside 15 minutes at the end of each day during your experiment for structured reflection. Ask yourself, what went well today at my adjusted pace? What challenges emerged? What insights or new perspectives appeared? This daily practice prevents valuable lessons from slipping away unnoticed in the rush to tomorrow's activities. Journal prompts can structure this reflection process for deeper insights. Consider questions like, when did I feel most engaged and energized today? Where did I feel resistance to slowing down? What quality differences did I notice in my work or interactions? What would have been missed had I maintained my usual pace? These targeted inquiries extract specific learning rather than general impressions, building a dataset that reveals patterns over time. The real-world implications of pace management extend far beyond personal productivity. Teams that create deliberate space for thinking and reflection consistently outperform those trapped in constant urgency. Google's Project Aristotle, their extensive research into team effectiveness, found that psychological safety ranked as the most important factor in high-performing teams. Rushed environments undermine this safety, creating fear of mistakes and discouraging the thoughtful dissent that often prevents major errors. Your personal experiment offers insights that could transform not just your work, but your leadership approach. When collecting data from your experiment, look beyond obvious metrics like tasks completed. Consider subtler indicators like the number of new ideas generated, instances of deep satisfaction, quality of solutions to problems, and energy level at day's end. These factors often reveal the hidden costs of excessive speed that conventional productivity measures miss. The most valuable outcomes of slower living frequently appear in these secondary measurements rather than in primary productivity metrics. As your week-long experiment progresses, Notice how your perception of time itself might shift. Many participants in similar experiments report that time paradoxically expands when they slow down. They feel less rushed, yet accomplish what matters. This phenomenon reflects how our experience of time relates more to our attention quality than to clock measurement. When fully present rather than mentally rushing ahead, we often discover an abundance of time hiding within our previously compressed experience. The pause is not merely an absence of action, but a positive space where integration happens, insights emerge, and sustainable success takes root. By mastering this space through deliberate practice, you develop the stillness advantage that transforms both productivity and life satisfaction. From experiment to lifestyle. As your week-long experiment concludes, review your documentation with analytical curiosity. What patterns emerged? Which adjusted practices delivered the most significant benefits? Where did slowing down feel uncomfortable yet ultimately productive? This analysis helps distinguish between reflexive resistance to change and genuine areas where your previous pace better served your needs. Not every activity benefits from slowing down. The goal is discernment rather than universal deceleration. Transitioning from experiment to sustainable practice requires designing environment supports. Our surroundings powerfully influence our pace. Create visual reminders in your workspace, perhaps a small hourglass on your desk or a nature image that evokes tranquility. Schedule white space in your calendar, protected time with no assigned tasks that serves as a buffer against constant acceleration. Consider technology adjustments like removing non-essential notifications or using apps that encourage mindful use rather than endless engagement. The most successful pace adjustments become rituals rather than willpower challenges. Morning routines that include 5 minutes of planning create proactive focus rather than reactive rushing. Transition rituals between activities, like 3 deep breaths before entering a meeting, prevent carrying the mental residue of one task into the next. Evening reflection practices help process the day's events before sleep, improving both learning and recovery. These simple rituals become anchors for your adjusted pace, requiring minimal conscious effort once established. The martial arts concept of zanshin, continued awareness even after action, offers a powerful framework for this integration. A martial artist maintains alertness after completing a technique, neither rushing to the next move nor collapsing in relief. This balanced readiness creates both protection and opportunity. In daily life, zanshin translates to maintaining present awareness in the space between activities, not frantically planning the next task, not mentally checking out, but remaining centered in alert readiness. This middle path between hyperactivity and disengagement defines the stillness advantage. The wisdom of slow is smooth, smooth is fast, challenges our cultural assumptions about speed while offering a more sustainable path to meaningful achievement. By applying martial principles of deliberate practice, questioning the faster is better paradigm, and conducting personal experiments in pace management, you develop the stillness advantage that transforms both productivity and well-being. The most powerful outcomes often emerge not from constant acceleration, but from the thoughtful pauses that allow integration, insight, and intentional action. The paradox of rushing reveals itself most clearly when we observe the difference between activity and achievement. In a world that praises speed and constant motion, we've forgotten that true mastery comes not from hurrying, but from deliberate practice and intentional execution. The martial artist doesn't win by frantically throwing punches. They win through economy of movement and precise timing. Throughout this chapter, we've challenged the conventional wisdom that equates speed with productivity. We've examined how deliberate slowness, particularly when learning new skills or tackling complex problems, creates the foundation for eventual speed and excellence. The craftsman who carefully builds muscle memory through repetition ultimately outperforms the rushed novice. Our personal experiments with deliberate deceleration demonstrate that when we consciously slow down, our minds clear, our decisions improve, and our actions become more purposeful. Far from wasting time, we actually reclaim it by eliminating the errors, miscommunications, and rework that rushing inevitably produces. This final chapter completes our journey toward understanding the transformative power of pause. We began by recognizing how constant activity compromises our decision making. We discovered how scheduled breaks enhance creativity and problem solving. We learned that deliberate pauses aren't just beneficial, they're essential for peak performance and lasting fulfillment. The deceleration protocol, converting rush to rhythm. The goal of this process is to transform a currently rushed activity into a deliberate practice that produces better results with less stress. By intentionally slowing down, you'll discover how to achieve greater efficiency through mindful execution rather than frantic effort. Step 1. Identify your rush zone. One day. Select one recurring task or routine where you typically hurry. Choose something manageable, your morning routine, a regular work presentation, or how you prepare for meetings. Document exactly how you currently perform this task, noting specifically where you feel pressured, anxious, or rushed. Step 2. Deconstruct and visualize. One day. Break your selected activity into its component parts. For each step, ask, what would this look like if performed with complete presence and care? Visualize yourself moving through each step with deliberate attention. What changes? How does it feel different? Write down your observations. Step 3. Design your slowness experiment. One day. Create a detailed plan for approaching this task differently over the next week. If it's your morning routine, perhaps you'll wake 30 minutes earlier, prepare items the night before, or establish a mindfulness practice before checking your phone. The key is to build in buffer time and eliminate the conditions that trigger rushing. Step 4. Implementation and documentation. 7 days. Execute your plan for a full week. After each session, record your observations in a journal. How did slowing down affect your mental state? Did you notice any physical differences? Breathing, tension, posture? How did the quality of your work change? Were there unexpected benefits or challenges? Did you actually save time by avoiding mistakes or rework? Step 5. Analysis and refinement. One day. After your week-long experiment, review your notes and assess the results. What worked? What didn't? Where did you resist slowing down? Did others notice a difference in your work quality or demeanor? Use these insights to refine your approach for continuing this practice. Step 6. Expand your rhythm zones. Ongoing. Identify 2 additional areas of your life where applying slow is smooth, smooth is fast principles could yield significant benefits. Begin implementing your refined approach in these new domains, creating a gradually expanding circle of deliberate action in your life. Step 7. Establish reflection rituals. Weekly. Schedule a weekly 15-minute session to review how your deceleration practices are affecting your overall productivity, stress levels, and satisfaction. These regular check-ins prevent backsliding and help integrate your new rhythms into permanent habits. The beauty of this protocol lies not just in its immediate effects, but in how it gradually rewires your relationship with time and effort. As you practice intentional slowness in one area, you'll begin noticing opportunities for it elsewhere. The calm competence you develop becomes a competitive advantage in a world of frantic performers. Throughout this book, we've dismantled the myth that constant motion equals progress. We've seen how scheduled pauses allow us to access deeper wisdom, make better decisions, and ultimately accomplish more meaningful work. We've recognized that true productivity isn't measured by busyness, but by valuable outcomes and personal fulfillment. The stillness advantage isn't about doing less, it's about achieving more by moving with purpose. It's about recognizing that our most valuable resource isn't time, but attention, and that how we direct that attention determines both our effectiveness and our satisfaction. As you close this book and return to your life, remember that implementing these practices isn't adding another task to your list. It's fundamentally changing how you approach every item already on it. The power of pause isn't a technique, it's a transformation in how you move through the world. Start small. Choose one area to slow down. Notice what happens. Then let that experience guide you toward your next step. The path to mastery isn't found in rushing forward, but in moving with intention, presence, and purpose. Slow is smooth, smooth is fast. And in that paradox lies the secret to multiplying both your success and your sanity. Epilogue. Stillness, your unfair advantage in a world that can't slow down. I began this journey with a promise to show you how strategic stillness could transform both your outcomes and your experience of life. We've traveled from understanding the science of pause to reimagining what productivity truly means. We've challenged the cult of busy and rebuilt decision-making frameworks from the ground up. Now, standing at the finish line, I can say with certainty, stillness isn't just a nice-to-have luxury. It's the unfair advantage that will set you apart in a world addicted to motion. The path we've explored isn't about abandoning ambition or retreating from challenges. It's about approaching them with a fundamentally different energy. The Stillness Advantage doesn't ask you to do less. It empowers you to accomplish more by doing better. Through intentional pauses, you create the space where clarity emerges, where innovation becomes possible, where the signal rises above the noise. Remember Sarah, the startup founder who transformed her company's trajectory by instituting mandatory thinking time? Or Marcus, who rescued his marriage by learning to pause before reacting? Their stories aren't anomalies. They represent what becomes possible when we reject the false promise of perpetual motion. The core principles we've covered form a new operating system for success. First, strategic pauses increase productivity rather than diminishing it. The research is clear. Our brains simply aren't designed for continuous output. The rejuvenation that comes from brief stillness actually expands our capacity for focused work. Second, decision quality improves dramatically when we create space between stimulus and response. This buffer zone is where wisdom lives, where we can separate facts from emotional reactions, where we can align choices with our deeper values rather than momentary pressures. Third, creativity and innovation require emptiness. The constant input that characterizes modern life leaves no room for original thought. By deliberately creating empty space, we allow connections to form that otherwise couldn't exist. Fourth, presence is a competitive advantage. While others fragment their attention, your capacity to be fully engaged with a conversation, a challenge, or an opportunity will set you apart in both personal and professional spheres. I won't pretend implementation will be easy. You'll face resistance from cultural expectations, from colleagues who mistake motion for progress, even from your own conditioned impulses. The discomfort of slowing down when everything around you accelerates can feel almost physically painful at first. But I've yet to meet someone who mastered strategic stillness and then abandoned it. Once you experience the clarity and power that comes from this practice, you won't want to return to the chaos of perpetual motion. The path forward. Start small. Remember the micro-pause techniques from Chapter 3, the 3 deep breaths before responding to a triggering email, the 60-second reflection before entering an important meeting. These tiny interventions require minimal disruption, but yield immediate benefits. Build your stillness muscles gradually. Just as you wouldn't attempt a marathon without training, don't expect to immediately implement 2-hour thinking blocks into your schedule. Begin with 5 minutes of undistracted thought and expand from there. Create environmental triggers. The phone-free dinner table, the morning walk without podcasts, the thinking chair where no devices are allowed. Your physical environment can either support or sabotage your stillness practice. Find your tribe. Share what you're learning with at least one person who will support your commitment to strategic pauses. Better yet, invite them to join you in experimenting with these practices. Collective change is always more sustainable than isolated efforts. Document your discoveries. Keep a simple record of the insights and decisions that emerge from your stillness practice. This tangible evidence will strengthen your resolve when the pull of busyness inevitably returns. I acknowledge there are circumstances where these principles face genuine limitations. Those working multiple jobs to survive, single parents with minimal support, or individuals in truly crisis-driven professions may find full implementation challenging. The Stillness Advantage isn't about privilege. It's about working with whatever margins you have, however narrow. The future belongs to those who can maintain clarity amidst confusion, who can access deeper wisdom when others react from the surface, who can hold steady when everything around them spins faster. This isn't just about personal well-being, though that alone would justify the effort. It's about effectiveness, innovation, and sustainable impact. You picked up this book because something in you recognized that the status quo isn't working. That perpetual motion creates the illusion of progress while often moving us further from what matters. Trust that intuition. It's pointing you toward a better way. The world doesn't need more busy people. It needs more present people, more thoughtful people, more people who have rediscovered the revolutionary power of pause. I'll leave you with this final thought. The stillness advantage isn't about what you add to your life, it's about what you finally give yourself permission to remove. The distractions, the reflexive responses, the meaningless motion. What remains is what matters. And in that space of what remains, you'll find not just success, but the sanity and satisfaction that make success worth pursuing. Your advantage awaits in the spaces between. Step into them. In an age of acceleration, nothing can be more exhilarating than going slow. In an age of distraction, nothing is so luxurious as paying attention. In an age of constant movement, nothing is so urgent as sitting still. Pico Iyer.